David. I am David Kennedy, an interviewer for the Holocaust Oral History Project of the Orange County Anti-Defamation League. Today, October 10th, 1993, we are interviewing Rose DeLiema, a survivor of the Holocaust. Thank you very much for giving testimony, a very precious gift to all of us and future generations. Rose, would you give us your name and date of birth?
Sure. My name is Rose Judy DeLiema. I was born June 9, 1921. The Judy I put in when I became an American citizen. I never had a middle name, and my Dutch first name was actually Roosje van Gelder, my maiden name.
How do you spell Van Gelder?
Van Gelder, V-A-N-G-E-L-D-E-R.
And you were born where and when?
In The Hague,
In The Hague.
On June 9, 1921.
Tell me something about your childhood.
Well, I have the best memories of my childhood, and that gives me a lot of strength to think about and talk about. And my parents were the most intelligent people, even though they didn't have a school education. I'll tell you about how my parents met. My mother worked as a cook in a very rich family's home. And somebody thought they would find a nice husband for my mother. So they made a date, and on a Shabbat, Saturday afternoon, my father came, all dressed up, to pick up my mother. And when she came out of the house at a certain time, he approached her, and he was smoking a cigarette. My mother looked at him, and she said, "Sorry, sir, but if you have those ideas, you better walk to the right and I walk to the left." My father didn't know what she was referring to, because he never thought about it not to smoke, because he wasn't raised that religious. So my father said, "What's wrong?" And then he said about his smoking, and then he put his cigarette away, and he never smoked on Shabbat anymore, because they ended up getting married. My mother taught him a lot of Hebrew. His parents both were Jewish. He came from the northern part of Holland. His mother died when he was quite young, and then his father remarried, and his stepmother encouraged him to learn a trade. There's a fly. And so he became a very good tailor. And my father was 3 years younger than my mother. And my mother was the most and biggest help to him, because she made all the decisions, and that made him even love her more, because that was easy for him. My father was an optimist. He was always happy-go-lucky. And my mother took care of all the finances. Now, that was not the problem of how to invest money, because there was not enough money. But they had to struggle from the living that they made. But we never went to bed hungry. And my father always said, "Your mother knows to make a quarter from a dime." Mm-hmm. The way she handled that, just perfect. And I had one older sister. She was born in February 1920, the 23rd of February. And then my mother was nursing the baby, not thinking that she would have another baby real soon. But she didn't feel so good. She went to the doctor. The doctor said, "You better stop nursing the baby, because you're expecting another baby." "Oh," she said, "that's impossible, because I'm nursing the baby." "Oh," she said, "from impossible, more babies are born." So I was born, and my father was a little bit disappointed I wasn't a boy, because he wanted a boy so badly. And then the third child was my sister, Rosetta, and she was born January 1st, 1924. Another girl. And then my mother was pregnant again a couple of years later, and there was the boy, and we were all looking forward to it so much. And he was born July 14, 1926. I know all the dates, I never forget them either. And we were all so happy, and we all hoped for a boy so badly that when I was married and I was expecting a baby, all I wanted was boys. And I ended up having 2 boys. We had a very good childhood. I don't know if I should go into a lot more details how...
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
I would just offer a quick comment. My birthday is July 14th.
Oh, it is. Oh.
And your oldest sister, her name?
Elizabeth, that we called her Bet, B-E-P, Bet. She was very sweet and very tender-hearted. I talk about myself, I was more tough. I was sporty and stuff like that. And my youngest sister, Rosetta, she had a little problem health-wise. She had a little infection on her lungs, and doctor was afraid that would turn out in tuberculosis. So she went to a special place for the summertime where they had all those children. And then during the wintertime, when there was no sun in Holland, not much, we took her to, what do you call that? The sun shining on her?
Vacation area?
No, the doctor, in the doctor's office.
Oh.
I think of it later, but that made her feel better. We had to go twice a week or so to have that done. And so she outgrew that, and we were especially concerned because my father lost a sister. It just happened to be with the same name on that same illness while he was growing up, but she overcame it by growing up. Well, we did a lot of sports, but we had to choose between learning how to do gymnastics and how to do swimming because you had to pay to be a member. So then my mother said, what do you want to choose? And we chose gymnastics. So once a year we had a beautiful fast and exhibition, and all the parents came to watch, but it was in a big hall somewhere, and it was expensive to go. So if you would sell 10 tickets, you would get 1 free. So my sisters and I always managed to sell 20 tickets, so we had 2 free tickets. And then on that same evening, you could buy, for intermission, you could buy bread and with corned beef and liver. That was a special in Holland, a roll with corned beef and liver. I'm always surprised they don't serve that here. Maybe liver is not so good for you, I don't know. But anyway, my mother couldn't afford to buy all that. What she did, she bought a big handbag and she prepared at home the best sandwiches, and we ate it at the party. Sometimes better than what they bought over there. And then we always had fish for Shabbat after we came out from temple, from shul, we call it. But sometimes the fish was very expensive, and there was one special man who lived in the beach town like Santa Monica compared to Los Angeles. There was a town, Scheveningen, compared to The Hague. And he would come to my mother to sell fish on Fridays, always, and or Thursdays sometimes. And then he would come, and he said, you want the fish? And my mother looked at, oh, that's beautiful. How much is it? And he said, so that much. And she closed up. She said, I cannot afford it, but just take it and just go upstairs for a cup of coffee. So he would say, I still remember the man's name, Martin, the fishman, the fishman. And he said, how much do you want to pay for the fish? Oh, no, she said, I cannot tell you. No, tell me how much. And my mother gave a price. And he said, no. And he closed it up, and he went away. And my father said, how could you tell her that little to pay for the fish? He said, my mother said, it was easy. That's all I can afford to pay for the fish. And my father said, well, what are we going to do? Tomorrow we won't have fish or anything. Don't worry. So she went upstairs. And they had little mirrors hanging outside the window. We lived on the 2nd story. And they saw the fisherman go to the corner, turn around, and come back. And then he would come and he'd say, he rang the doorbell. He said, okay, bring me a bucket, and I'll... No, my mother said, I don't want you to lose money on it. My mother played that part. Just go, and you get your coffee anyway. He said, no. He said, I like you. I want you to have fish. And then every week we had fish. They all played that kind of a game together. And Saturday night was the most beautiful night. We had to wait until the 3 stars came. We sat around and Mother would sing songs, and across the street there was a store where people buy on time. And that was a shame in Holland, you would buy on time. My mother said, only buy when you can pay for it. Because after you pay off, then the guy in the store sells you something else. He said, it's just like a ship who never comes into the harbor. I'm glad that the Americans don't think that way, because nobody would sell anything, I suppose, if you cannot buy on time. But anyway, that's the teaching my mother gave. Or she saw a lady walking to the big market where a Jewish man was selling bananas and fruit on Shabbat. And my mother would say, see that lady there? Now, they might have more money than we do, but they never have a day of rest, and they don't know what they're missing. And it's really meaningful now when I think about it. At that time, I thought, oh, Mother, you know, but now it makes more sense to me. That's so important to have that Shabbat. And then after, we made Havdalah, and then we all sat around. Most of the time we spent in the kitchen, but on Saturday night we sat in the living room, and we did our homework. We had to catch up because we didn't go to school on Saturdays, and they were open. My father would have some sewing work to do. My mother started peeling potatoes and cleaning vegetables for the next day. So, I mean, such a warm feeling in my family. And we lived on a big square, and people would walk around there, and a man, especially with his son, who was kind of sickish, and every so often he fainted. So my mother was the first one who would run outside and bring him a pillow for his head. And my father said, just let somebody else know. She said, I feel good about that. And she was a special woman, too, that everybody told her their problems. And not because my mother was nosy, but my mother had made time to listen. And sometimes she gave advice and everything. So I say she didn't have schooling, but she was a very smart woman. And then also, she always told us to learn as much as possible, because she said that's one thing nobody can take away from you. And that proved later on in my life, because I learned 3 languages. You have to, in Holland, learn a lot in order to just communicate with people right across the border and the office where you work. And when I was in camp, knowing German helped me a lot, because I could overhear what the Germans were talking about, the orders that they were giving. Mm-hmm. And when I was in a labor camp, there was French forced labor. He found out that I spoke French, and he would bring the material on the table. He was not allowed to talk to us because the Gestapo women were sitting around, but he would sing a French song like Alouette, chante Alouette, but instead of using the words Alouette, chante Alouette, he gave me the news from how far the Russians from Berlin or something like that. And that gave me encouraged me, and I told the other girls about that, and so it really helped me a whole lot. And I learned English, so as soon as I came here, I got a job with the Bank of America, because I didn't speak it maybe as good as now, but the man who interviewed me over there, after trying 10 different jobs to get a job which I couldn't get in, for instance, I went to the telephone company of all the places with my accent to go to the telephone company. So I went to Bank of America, and that man interviewed me, and he said, I said, well, I'm sorry that I speak with an accent. He said, it's quite all right. When I came here a couple of years ago, or 20 years ago, I spoke with an accent too, so he hired me. And so that was a big, big advantage.
You don't have any accent now. You speak
Oh, well, that's okay. I'm not conscious of it.
Tell me more about your childhood. Your neighborhood, was it mostly Jewish?
No. There was in Holland, there was no such a thing as a ghetto. I shouldn't say that. In Amsterdam, there were a lot of streets where Jewish people wanted to live close together, but there was no such a thing as a ghetto. And we had a very good relationship with all our neighbors who were not Jewish at all. And it was no point of bringing out what religion you were. Now, we respected each other. For instance, on Saturdays, we didn't do anything, but on Sundays, my mother was very clean in the house and everything. We had to dust, and usually in Holland, you go with the dust cloth and you go outside. My mother wouldn't allow us to do that on Sundays, because people might walk into church and they might be offended, or whatever, outside, everything in the house. But on Sunday morning, it was just like the beginning of a new year. The bells are ringing. Well, at our house, our doorbell was ringing constantly because my mother wanted to give everybody a chance to make a living. My father said, if you divide it, nobody makes a living. But, for instance, there came the man pick up the shoes to repair. There came men from the Jewish community. There came one for, like, Bikur Halim, and a little bit. We didn't give much, but my mother always managed to give some money there. Then from the funeral organization, was never used, but we didn't know it at the time. So you, if God forbid something would happen, then you would have money. Whatever happened to the money? Well, we never looked into that. And another lady came. She was a widow, and she sold beans and tea at the door, so she could make us. It went on and on and on. And then we always had company, people stopping by, because my father had his workroom in the house. So they always knew somebody was home. So when they rang the door, oh, no, somebody come upstairs, and they said, it's my father. It was such a, and I don't only say that myself, but I had a lot of girlfriends later on when I went to secondary school, high school. It was more than high school, I think. But anyway, and the girls, quite often rich girls, would tell me, you're so lucky to live in such a family where they had all the luxury that they wanted and we didn't. But it was just great. But for me, sometimes it was a hard feeling because you got books from given to you if you were poor enough, and you were so qualified to get free books where the others had to buy. But the books had a big stamp on it on about every other page that it said that it was free and given to you. And I remember studying. I always felt bad when I came to a page where that big stamp was on, you know, be embarrassed. But I really didn't have anything to be embarrassed. But as a child growing up, you don't know about that.
So you went to school that was not a all-Jewish school?
Oh, when I was growing up, grade school, I was in, there was a school real close by, about 2 blocks away. So we always walked to school, came home for lunch, and that was all mixed, non-Jewish. And then on Friday afternoon, the Jewish kids were allowed to leave early because Shabbat sometimes started at 4 o'clock. So we all ran home, and our house was always clean, but on Friday night it smelled so good and everything was special. My mother baked a boterkoek, like butter cake. That was traditional every week, butter cake. But she left a little bit of dough for all of us, and we ate that, and it was so good. And then I remember saying to my mother, why do you bother to cook it? Because it tastes so good like this. And Max and Robert know from experience, because when I came here the first couple of years, I made the boterkoek not knowing that butter is not so good for you. But that's how I remember the Friday nights. They were great. And then on Friday night we ate a good dinner. My mother had, for instance, she would buy chickens alive because that was more reasonable. And so and then the shochet would come at our house and butcher the chicken. And first when he saw his girls, he would chase us with that live chicken, and then he would butcher it. Sometimes Mother bought 2. And then the baker across the street had a little backyard. And he would keep that other chicken for us for next week. And then after the shochet would butcher the chicken, and God forbid there was a spot on the liver or something, or the blood wouldn't run out right away. It was not kosher. And don't think that my mother would eat it. And you know where the chicken went? To the baker. He ate it. Well, because to him it didn't mean anything. And we didn't have chicken. My father didn't accept that very well, but for my mother, well, it's not kosher, we cannot eat it. So, and so all those little things that make. So then on Friday night we never ate potatoes for some reason. The Jewish people never ate potatoes on Friday. And a meal without potatoes in Holland's unbelievable. You never heard of a meal without potatoes. So why to have Friday night more different than any other night? It's not Pesach, but it was Friday night. And we didn't miss it at all, because afterwards we sat around, we ate peanuts, we had candy. It was just, well, I'm talking about it now, I get that feeling inside how nice and cozy it was. And that's what's missing for a lot of children nowadays in in the way of life, that they're more busy with other stuff, and they don't get those values for their later life. Because until this day, when we came in the United States in 1950, well, we had to adjust to our baseball groups and football and stuff. So Max and Robert wanted to go on Friday night to football games, and we didn't allow them. And I tell them until this day, I said, you know, I still feel bad because I understand that it means so much. Well, Max and Robert said, well, it didn't do us any harm, that we didn't go. But we just didn't fit in right away to, and of course we cannot change. But I think that kids, they don't realize I'm missing out a lot on looking back on their life, because I know how much it helped me to the value of having just such a warm home life. So I was 3 years in grade school, say, until the 3rd class, and then they started, they called it a Stelselschool. That means special school. And that was, when we came in the morning, you would have 1 hour Hebrew, then the non-Jewish teachers would come, and we had regular education, and then sometimes in the afternoon from 4 to 5 again Hebrew. So that's why I have a good background. I wish they would have taught Ivrit, because I would have been able to talk Ivrit real good, but at that time they only taught the prayers and everything. So while we were in that school, I got to know the principal of the school, and he played an important part in my life later on, but I don't know if you want me to talk about it now or...
No, let's talk some more about your sisters and your brother went to the same school.
Yes.
And that went through what grade?
My sister stayed in school until she was 18, and then she, that school stayed until you were 12, 13 years old. Mm-hmm. And then you went your own way in the other schools. Now, my sister stayed in school until she was 17 or 18. She started working for a Jewish bakery store. There were refugees from Poland or from Germany, and they started a bakery store with very good bread, pumpernickel, and they were the best. Jaeger was the name, J-A-G-E-R, with 2 umlaut on the A. And she worked there, and it was a big help for those people because they didn't speak Dutch. And my sister, and actually she worked there until the war, 42, 43, because until they picked up everybody. And they had more German soldiers customers because that's the bread they were used to. And as a result of that, in my family, we were never short of bread coupons because my sister took more coupons from the Germans than that she was allowed to. And you can't call that stealing, but it's also a matter of not being hungry at home. So, and we never sold any of them, but we gave to my mother-in-law, I remember, and all kinds of people. Because she just, what do they care how many coupons they had to get? They get some special rations because they were German soldiers. Well, she and of course, that whole, except for one son, that whole family was killed also during the war.
Was that your sister Beb?
Beb, the oldest one. And then my younger sister, she was only 15 or 16, so she was still in school, and but then it was impossible to go through dangers and everything. And my father didn't make much of a living anymore because there were no people who came. And so she worked in the cousin of my husband's family and housework. Now, I went to school, I went to that office from German Jewish refugees. And I didn't talk about that yet, did I? No. And I got that job through a Jewish organization who let people, who find jobs for people who don't want to work on Shabbat, on Saturdays. So they were the nicest people, very, very rich, from Berlin and from Frankfurt, and they left Germany already in 33 and 34 and took all their belongings, and they set up an offices again in Holland. I remember the street, Amaliastraat, and beautiful homes. And so if they knew people from Germany, they let them come to work for them, because at that time it was still possible, with a few exceptions. There were already concentration camps, but they picked up some Jews in Germany too, but I cannot say who or what, but they had already concentration camps in 33 and 34 and 35, because I talked to somebody who came out of that camp. Now, maybe it was just for punishment, I don't know. But they started they didn't wait until the Second World War. They started already years ago in Germany, like Kristallnacht, that was already before 1940.
Rose, before the German Jews started coming across, and a few years earlier, would you say there was much anti-Semitism in Holland?
No.
You didn't?
Not at all. Not, well, there was a group of National Socialist group, like you have here, skinheads. Mm-hmm. You can almost compare it, but they were looked down upon. They didn't have a chance to do anything. Maybe there were some copycats from Germany. No, the Dutch people were unhelpful to the German Jews who came to Holland. They were, they had set up, not camps, but places where they get food and everything. They tried to find jobs for them. No, they were good. In fact, in our house, there was a couple who lived with us. We got a little refund from that organization to pay for their food. And then eventually they started their own butcher shop somewhere in Holland after staying with us for I don't know, I cannot say how long they were there. But they ended up being shipped back to Germany again when the Second World War started. So no, before the war there was no problem as far as anti-Semitism goes.
So your earliest fears were when the German Jews started coming out of Germany and migrating to Holland.
And then we heard everything that happened, but you didn't want to believe that it was true. And I'm sure that's a lot to do with the people here too, that they could not believe that was happening, that was true. But I have to say, there's one guy on that picture, I think he's on that picture, who was like a skinhead, I'll call him. Mm-hmm. But he was an exception. We all looked down on him. So there was something going on, but not in a big scale at all. They tried it. And there was a group, and the guy who was in charge, like Hitler in Germany, this was Mussert, M-U-S-S-E-R-T, I think. He was a terrible guy, and so he promoted it, but I don't know where he got his information from, but it was easy to do, because if they say, we give you uniform and we pay you stuff, whatever, there were always people to find to do anything for money.
Let's look at some of the pictures here. Could you talk a bit about this first picture?
I won't move too much. Now, this is my mother. Mm-hmm. And this is my father, and that was taken during the war, in 41, I would say, that particular one, because I think my father has a little star on there. Is it? Does it show a little bit? I think so.
No, I don't see the star.
Well, anyway, to look at their ages, I think it was in 1940, 41. And it happened that my grandfather, who was a shamus in the shul, in the synagogue in Breda, where my mother was from, in the southern part of Holland. The big picture is hanging there. You cannot see his face anymore. But I happen to have that picture because my mother somehow gave it to non-Jewish friends of ours who kept it for us, because I have several things that I still have that my mother gave to people to keep for her. And then this is...
this other picture on the bottom here is...
And that is my sister, Elizabeth, we call her Beth, and then I was the second one, Roosje, at that time. And this is Zeta, who's the one who was sickish for a little while, and that's my brother Hartog. And his name, and my youngest grandchild, Jonathan, his middle name is Hart. So his name was Jonathan Hart, and there was a show not many years ago about it. But there's one thing that I want to bring out too, and that is, they always refer to the 6 million who were killed, and actually there were so many more people killed, because if you look at my family later on, we are a family of 12 DeLiemas, where my husband and I are survivors, so can you imagine, whole generations were wiped out.
Yes. And
another thing I want to bring out is that people didn't go to the gas chambers as sheep, because that hurts me when they say that, because everybody fought in his own way. I know my mother would have done anything to stay alive, but there were no possibilities. There were not enough non-Jewish people to help, and we didn't have the funds, because the only way you could find people to help you was for if you could pay, and we didn't have that choice. So there's nothing else we could do. And then we didn't get a cooperation from all of Holland, because in Denmark they did a lot more for the Jews than they did in Holland. But I still have things that, for instance, we had to turn in our radio. We didn't turn in our radio. We gave them an old, junky, broken thing from non-Jewish friends, and we gave our radio to them. Hiding things from them, we didn't follow, and if we had a chance. So I hope that concept will be taught to a lot of people over the years, because especially in Israel, the Jewish people in Israel say, oh yeah, but the Jews in Europe, all they did, whatever they were told. And that is not true, and I want to really bring that up.
Tell me more about your mother and father, their family. They had aunts and uncles?
Yes. Oh, let me first say that my parents stayed in Holland until 1943, April 23rd, when, oh no, I'm wrong. My parents were picked up January 4th, 1943. And the reason why they stayed so much longer than the other young Jewish people, because in 42 they started picking up all the younger teenagers in Holland and shipped them away. They thought it was going to a camping trip and work there and come back as soon as the war was over. The reason why my sisters and I, because I wasn't, when that started, why my sisters and my brother and I didn't get that call was because in addition to being a tailor, my father was a pallbearer for the Jewish community. And they got a speer, that is a piece of paper that everybody was fighting for to get, but he got it because that was still intact until later on, 42, 43. So we were allowed to stay officially longer in our house on the address Oranjeplein 2, The Hague. That's an orange square in The Hague. And so that was the reason that we saw a lot of our friends go before we went. So then Saul and I, that's my husband then.
When did you meet Saul?
I met my husband in 1939. And I knew him through my brother-in-law, who happens to be on that other picture, because they belong to a Jewish community. And my husband, I was introduced to him, and then we got engaged in 1940.
Was this before the war broke out with Germany?
May the war broke out. And we got engaged January 27, 1940. And then I took him to Breda to meet all the family from my mother. And there was Pesach, April 1940. And we had so much fun. And it was over, the Yontif was over, and we started eating bread right away. And I never forget that my aunt, she said, oh, it's so good and everything is so good. I hope that this will stay that way. I know things come back to you later. And then in May, a terrible invasion. That was...
Describe that.
Okay. It was May 9, 1940, and it happened to be my sister-in-law's birthday. That's my husband's wife. And we were planning to go and visit her at night. And Saul traveled for the business from his father. So I said, well, I'll pick you up at the railroad station. I wait for you, and then we go together. Not that car, because I don't know. But the streetcar, because it was easy transfer. And we go to visit her. Okay. So I go to the railroad station. It's 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. The train didn't come. So finally the train came. And Saul came. He said, I don't know what's going on. He said, delay, terrible. And I've never seen so many priests and nuns in the train. He said, I don't know what's going on. So later on, those were spies. Those were German soldiers dressed up as priests and nuns and whatever, disguised. So we went home, and we didn't go to his sister anymore. And I went to my house. We lived within walking distance, about 5 minutes from each other. So my sister and I, we slept in the same bed, in the same room. In the middle of the night, we heard a lot of planes going over, and well, it wasn't strange because Holland was already mobilized, because England and France were already in war with Germany. So we looked out the window, and then we heard bombs coming down and things coming out of the sky, and those were parachutes with German soldiers, and they dropped on the Hague and everywhere over all of Holland. And we went downstairs to my parents, and because we were in the attic, our rooms, don't picture fancy rooms, but they were nice for us. We went downstairs, and my mother said, well, looks like the war is hitting us. So when it was a little bit quiet, I said, let's go over to Saul's house. So we went, my sister and I walked over there Friday morning, never forget. And we come over. My mother-in-law real sleepy. What's going on? Why are you here so early? I said, don't you know the war started with Germany? The Germans are all over. Oh, those are, you still didn't want to believe it, but that was the beginning of the war. And then, so we struggled through the first year, and the amazing thing is, the first year hardly anything was done against Jews. Nothing. Now, I think it was part of their idea to relax everybody and then get you all at once, that you don't get panicked. Now, during the war days, there were a lot of people who escaped to England and who tried to escape to England because there were mines in the ocean and the North Sea, and a lot of them were killed. There were guys who shipped them out, got the money, and didn't give them. So there were a lot of suicides because my father was pallbearer. So there was so many families committed suicide right then. In those few days, they couldn't face up to the fact that the Germans were coming in Holland.
The first
5
week,
days.
First 5 days.
During because Holland couldn't fight against the big Germany, and then on May 14, my father, there was the big bombing of Rotterdam. It was all damaged, burned to the ground, and I never see my father-in-law cry. But day afterwards, because they had a lot of relatives in Rotterdam, he went on a bike to Rotterdam. He came back, and when he came back home the same day, it's not that far distant, tears rolling down, he said, "You never believe what happened to Rotterdam. It's all damaged." But life went on after that, and there were not many laws came out until beginning of 42. So Saul and I said, "Oh, what are we going to do?" Oh, then the Jewish Council started, and I have to say, if it would have been better if there never would have been a Jewish Council, or if there never would have been a Jewish community who would have handed over the administration to the Germans, because all they did is walk in. They had all the list of everybody. Like if you remember I still know people now who don't want to be members from Jewish organization because they cannot tell by saying, "Hey, you're Jewish or you're not Jewish," especially not in Holland, because my whole family was blue-eyed and blonde, so you cannot tell. But so then Saul and I said, "You know what we'll do?" We were planning to get married because his grandparents were still alive, and he wanted them to be with us when we would get married. And but the grandparents was kicked out of the house, and they ended up in Auschwitz, and they never lived very long. But I'll talk about them when we come. And then I said, "Let's get married. Then at least officially we belong together. Then we eventually will go to whatever camp they send us." So when we got married, most of the Jewish people were already underground or in Poland. We didn't want to believe that they were all killed already. Saul's parents, so it was December 20, 1942. And my parents were still there, and Saul's parents were in hiding. So we got an aunt and uncle from Saul, and they acted as parents, as witnesses for the wedding. And I still have little pictures from it was not a wedding party, but from the shul where I got married. And I would have brought them along, but they are so dark, you cannot see anything of it. But the rabbi who blessed our wedding we were the last couple with that ceremony in December 20, 1942. And,
Rose,
yeah.
you said at that time that many of the Jews were in Poland?
Well, in 42, yeah. The younger people, they were, and my parents were still there because of my father's spear, that he was a pallbearer, you know. So when at my wedding in the congregation or in the temple, shul, there were more non-Jewish people than Jewish people, and they took an awful chance to come because that way they would admit that their friends to Jewish people. And there's one girl, she's in my class picture, I gave her my wedding bouquet, orchids. That's all I had. I wore a dress that I wore for my engagement because we knew our time was running out, that they would pick up everybody. And I said, could you save that for me? After the war, she gave it back to me. I still have it. And I showed it to the kids when it was our 50th wedding anniversary. Look, I said, and all it was just a bouquet of orchids. And whenever I see, because we didn't spend any money, oh, and then my mother, I said, Mom, you have to promise me one thing. Don't start crying during the ceremony, because if you start crying, I start crying, and everybody started crying, because everybody, and she did her best, and she did not cry. And she was just sitting, biting her lips. But she promised me not to, and she didn't. And she even managed to have a setting at our house. I should have brought that picture, but it's inflamed. And from the people that around that table on December 20, 4 lived after January 4th, because my parents were picked up January 4th, and all the other people were dead because they sent them to concentration camps. It's unbelievable how that happened so fast, and the only one that survived, are still alive after that date, was my husband and I, and his brother, who was married to a non-Jewish lady. All the others were gone. I mean, it's hard to tell you exactly what a fear it was to be alive, but a chance you took to just being alive. But we never did give up. So then they needed somebody to work at, I worked in a home to help people cleaning house and cook, a Jewish family. Their name was Hagens, and he was a well-known man. He had a newspaper in Rotterdam. And they were nice people, and they moved from Rotterdam to The Hague because Rotterdam was bombed more than The Hague. You know, they had attacks from England and America, which we love to hear, of course, but the danger of the bombs falling, so they lived in The Hague. And my mother-in-law knew him real well, so I went there to help him cook, and I left a few days a week early because there was a man who got a permit to stay if he was still teaching. So he tried to get some students, so he taught me English. I took English over there with another lady. And one day I came, and she said, Roosje, you don't have to come back tomorrow because we won't be here anymore. And I said, and I cannot go into details. I said, oh, I fully understand, and I wish you luck, because she was going underground or whatever, but she didn't. Oh, yeah, I saw a man taking pictures of him that day. So she said, I can tell you what's going on. I said, well, I wish you luck. So I never went back there, but I heard from the underground that they were picked up and sent straight to the Germans. And the guy who took the pictures got the money from them for taking the pictures, and I don't know how much money they paid him to bring him to a hiding place or something. That's how they ended up. So those things hurt so much, even when I think about it now, you know, that they tried. So don't say people just went and didn't try anything, because they did. So that was, so then I didn't have anything to do. I didn't bring any money in the house because I paid the money that I made at that Jewish family. Oh, and another thing, I had lunch over there, so that helped my parents, that they didn't have to feed me lunch at home. And so all the money I made, I gave to my mother to exist. So, so then I said, what shall I do? So somebody found out that they needed somebody as a secretary at Jewish Council, Hulp aan Vertrekkenden. That means aid to departing people. Help to help the people who woke up in the morning and go to Auschwitz. So what they did then, they sent people to help them, to get their stuff ready. Well, we all had our backpacks ready for a month. Every Jewish family had a backpack ready in case they were picked up in the morning to go. So then we went there to help them. And I was the secretary then from the man who was in charge. Now this man, his name was Blick. I do write about him. He got the list from the Gestapo where the police, the Dutch police, would come and pick up the people to bring to a place where they brought all the Jews who were picked up that morning. He got the list, but he had a messenger from the Jewish Council to go, as soon as he had the list, to warn them that they were going to be picked up and that they still had a chance to leave. So one way the Jewish Council was good, and the other way it was not. But it not automatically was bad, because they tried to help the Jewish people. But I look at my own parents, there was no chance. And your brain couldn't allow yourself to believe how bad it was going to be. And while I'm talking to you now, and when I talk to my husband about it, it's hard to imagine and to expect from anybody to visualize how we lived at that time. So when I worked there, I got a little paper, Ausweis, that I was valuable to whatever I did. So when I worked there on January 4th, Mr. Blick told me, he said, your parents' address is on the list. So, oh my God. So right away I went over there. I told my sisters, I said, they'll be here. And they said, well, we just have to go. There's no way. We have tried. And oh no, and my sister was engaged to a young man, Jewish man, in the countryside in Holland. And she got a permit once to go by train to him. I said, for heaven's sake, stay with him. Stay there. Don't come back. I cannot do that, she said, because the Germans will pick up you guys and take you. I said, chance that. She didn't want to do that. So that morning when I was there, but I was not officially at home anymore, because December 20 we got married, and I had to stay with my parents. Saul had to sleep somewhere else where he was officially assigned, because the police had come to pick up his parents who were in hiding already. So they closed his parents' home, so he didn't have anywhere to go. So he stayed with another Jewish family who would eventually take me. But first they needed a permit. So on December 20th, the day that I got married, I stayed at home for another 10 days maybe, because that permit didn't come through. Finally the permit came through. I could go officially to that other address. And that saved my life. Because if they would have come, if I wouldn't have had that permit, January 4th, and my parents were picked up, and my sister and my brother. And my brother drove a little car for the Jewish council, so he was allowed to stay, and I found a place for him to go. And so I had to say goodbye to my parents. I don't even have to tell you how bad that was. But my brother, my sister said to me, take good care of Hartog, you know. So I said to my brother, I found a place for him to stay with Jewish people. You could only stay with Jewish people at that time. And I said, you know, if you want to hide, I know a place for you. I found a man on a boat in the canals, and you can work there. He said, oh, I'm a 17-year-old boy. I just go, I just work, and the war might be over soon. And you didn't want to. He said, oh, maybe I see mom and dad and stuff like that. So it was not that they didn't try, but there was, for him, there was a possibility, but he couldn't see it as bad as it actually was. So then Saul and I were the two of us with that other Jewish family. And what I did, they were brought to Westerbork, to the camp in Holland. And we had a girl who used to work for Saul's father's business. She worked for the underground. And what we did is we got packages ready, and she mailed them for us, so they would have something more to eat in Westerbork. And Westerbork was paradise compared to Auschwitz. I mean, it was bad, but there were no gas chambers. And
where was Westerbork?
In Drenthe. Shall I spell Westerbork?
Yeah.
I think I have it in there. Maybe we can look it up. Oh, yeah. You want me to spell it? Westerbork. And it's in the province of Drenthe. And it is a coincidence that I'm now in touch with a gentleman who lives there, who gave my manuscript to the man who's in charge of the museum in Westerbork. that's an outside story, but I'm just writing to him now because I try to reach as many people as possible in my life.
Is this in Holland?
Yes. The province is Drenthe, D-R-E-N-T-H-E, Drenthe, northern part of Holland. I ended up there too. But, so Saul and I were with a Jewish family, and one morning, it was April 10 that I was referring to, he worked for a a place who made fur wrappings for the soldiers, like handcuff stuff and hats for Russia. And it was a Jewish company. That's why they still had their permit to stay there. So April 10, at night, raining, comes the police, the Dutch police, I want you to know again. They arrested all of them, father, mother, and that darling, beautiful, blonde little girl with a big brown. That hurt me so. They picked her up. She had to pick her up at night out of her bed. Through the rain, we had to walk to the next police station. And they took us too, because, so then the girl, Eva Roos was her name, and her husband's name was Herbert Voorzanger. And I knew him so well. And and I said, well, we don't work for the fur company, but they took us all. So they brought us in jail, and she put her little girl on there, and it was just heartbreaking. And she said to me, Eva, you'll get out, you'll see, because they only came for the people who work for the fur place, and you don't work for them. And I said, oh, come on, once they have you, they don't let you go. But you took it as a matter of fact. It was our turn, okay? That's my father said that too. He said, well, it's our turn, we have to go. We don't have any other choice. So Eva said, you'll come out. What happens, the Jewish council, Meneer Blik again, Mr. Blik, found out that Sal and I were imprisoned over there. So in the morning, the cell door opens and Rose DeLiema, oh, yeah, my name was Rose DeLiema, got out, and they released me and they released Sal. It was April 10, and Eva and her husband and the baby were all shipped away and killed. That whole group was murdered right away. I don't know where, so we were Auschwitz, I don't know. But Sal and I walked back all the way to a small office from the Jewish Council, and we got there, and they said, oh, what happens when we spend the night in prison? And they said, oh, we're so relieved that you guys, that they let you go, because maybe they allow the Jews to stay longer. April 13, in the newspaper, all the Jews have to report to a camp in Vught, that is in the southern part of Holland, V-U-G-H-T. That's the southern part of Holland. On your own, you were allowed to go by train, and that's how my little brother went with the family that he stayed, and they had a little boy too. You just had to report there. So Sal and I, we didn't have anywhere to go. Oh yeah, when we came, we couldn't back in the house of the people who worked for the fur company. So people who lived across the street, and he worked for the Jewish Council, said, you can stay with us. So we moved over there with whatever we had. And he said, well, maybe we can stay longer now. And no, sure enough, that report came out. He said, well, I have to tell you that he really took us in his trust. And he said, we're not going, we're going to hide. And if you want to, you'll find a hiding place for you. We were ready. We thought we'd go next week, the same time as my brother. And they did find a hiding place for us. You know where? Yes. People who did it for the money. But we couldn't go there right away, so another Jewish man who was mixed marriage, he took us in his house. I mean, all the details I have written in the manuscript, which is also, they have a copy of the manuscript in the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and in Yad Vashem, and in Amsterdam, too.
Rose, before we get to the first hiding place,
yeah.
We're almost at the end of this tape.
Yeah.
Your parents and both your sisters are still in Westerbork?
No, they were sent on. Oh no, they were sent on in. Let me see now. They were January 28 or 29. My sisters went. It is in my manuscript when they went to Auschwitz and were murdered, and a couple of weeks later, my parents. I don't know why my parents didn't go at the same time, because I wasn't there.
And on April 13th, 1943, all of the Jews in Holland were ordered to report
On the 23rd of April
on
in
the
Vught.
23rd.
Yeah,
In Fifth.
yeah.
Okay, that.
And that's when we went into hiding.
Okay, and you and Saul planned on going into hiding at that time.
Because we just happened to get an address from that other couple that we stayed with, and they survived the war to be in hiding. But we were caught, but not due to their fault. And then we stayed with, we call them Jan and Nel. I never mentioned their last name because they did it for the money, and I don't want anybody feel bad about it, because if it wouldn't have been for them, we wouldn't have any place to go. And they had a little boy, his name was Jackie, and he called his parents Papa and Mama, and the four of us, because the four of us were together over there, Papi and Mommy. So if he would talk to somebody else about us, it could be that that's the same name for Papa and Mama. But those people drank a lot, they spent all the money to buy records, and we had to leave there after a year because she became pregnant and she wanted another baby.
And the four of you, that was you and Saul and...
And Scheps, Herman and Alinka Scheps was their name, S-C-H-E-P-S. I don't know if he died too, but she died in the meantime. And again, if we wouldn't have known them, we would have never had a chance to hide. But that's for everybody when you look back on your life. Mm-hmm. And so then when we went into, once you go into hiding, you cannot go back anymore, because officially we didn't exist anymore. So instead of reporting on the 23rd of April to Vught, Saul and I walked, was not too far to the place. First, we stayed with the doctor whose wife was in the hospital, and he allowed us to stay with him. But you had to be real careful, because the neighbors didn't think anybody would be in the house if they would see him leaving in the morning, and they could call the police that were burglars. So then eventually we went to Jan and Nel's house, and we stayed there with the Scheps family. And then another thing that Nel did, we did all the housework, we did all the washing. She got all the washing from all the family to wash their clothes. We couldn't say no, because we were in their hands, but they saved our lives, actually. And then we, yeah.
How long were you with them?
About, we celebrated New Year's there, and he made a toast. The New Year from 1943 to 1944. And this is the best year ahead, and as far as I'm concerned, this war may last forever and ever. You have to drink to that.
He had a very remunerative year, a good year.
And
We'll take a break now. We've reached the end of the first page, and thank you very much. We'll pick up later on.
So far.
This is the continuation of the Rose DeLiema testimony. Let us resume. When we stopped to change tape, you were in hiding with Saul and two others at Jan and Nel's house?
Yes.
Tell us, why did you leave there?
We had to leave there because she was expecting a baby, and his brother was working in the underground, and there were some problems there, so they advised them to get rid of us, by telling us to go somewhere else. Now, the Scheps family had another connection, and they eventually went there, but we were on our own. We didn't know where to go. So in that case, my brother-in-law, who was married to a non-Jewish lady, still was officially in Holland, because they got permission to stay if they had a mixed marriage. So we went over there, and they were always helpful to help us out for a short while, because they were on the list eventually to be picked up also. So then we stayed there for a few days, or we didn't know in advance how long we were going to stay there. So we had to inquire, which was dangerous, because you didn't know who you could trust and who you could trust, because we were in the same town where we were born, so you were always afraid to run into somebody, and if he would report you or not, in case he wanted 5 or 10 guilders from the Germans to report another Jew. So you couldn't take that chance. Now, I went, somebody came and said, oh, I know so-and-so, and he's a butcher, and he'll be happy to take you. So we went there at night. When you go there, you take an awful chance, but that worked out okay. We went there, and the woman said, she treated us like live-in persons. She thought we picked her place because it was a nice house. She didn't even think about the danger. And her husband, who was a butcher, but in addition to that, he was in the black market. He came home every night, stoned, and at that time, the non-Jewish people also had a deadline to be inside the house, say, I don't remember the time, say 9 o'clock. He was never home. He came at 10, 11, and Saul and I said to each other, well, it's too dangerous to stay here because they expose themselves not only to us, but on the outside too. So we went back to my brother-in-law, and I thought, well, I have to go out myself and find, because we couldn't stay there. First of all, there was no possibility, but the danger was too big. So I went on my bike, and I went to, I had false papers. I forgot to mention that. I had a ticket. Everybody in Holland had to show who they were when they were stopped on the street, and this was stolen by the underground, and then they changed it, and my picture was on it, and I had to tell myself who I was. I still remember her name, Willempje Versteeg, and I lived in Hilversum, and that's another town in Holland, and I was born in 1920, 1 year before. So you really had to remember all that. So I put it in my pocket, and I told you I was lucky enough at that time. I had blonde hair and blue eyes, so you know how non-Jewish people picture Jewish people dark, and stuff. So I was lucky enough I didn't see anybody, and I went to the principal of the school, to the principal of the school where I was until for 6 years, until I went to secondary school. That was that school that they taught Hebrew in the morning and just the regular classes, and he was the principal of the regular classes. And all his students were gone because the school didn't exist anymore, because there were no interesting people interested in Hebrew education. So I knew his address, I rang his doorbell, and he was just overwhelmed and surprised and happy to see me. And he said, oh, it's just great. He heard from a few who were also in hiding. So he said, I'm so happy every time I see one of you guys, and it's just, but I mean, he didn't say come and stay with us, of course, but anyway, I said, well, I'm in big trouble because I don't know where to go. So he said, oh, he said, I would have gone to the principal of the secondary school, but I understand that he cooperates with the Germans, and I cannot trust him. He said, who's that? And I said, Mr. De Haas. Oh, he said. Well, he said, let me check out, and you come back tomorrow, and we'll talk about it some more. I said, okay. So I went home, and to my brother-in-law's house, and I said to Saul, I said, well, maybe I have some information tomorrow. I have to go back. So the next day I went back on the bike, and Mr. Bezemer is his name. He opened the door. He said, come right in. And I come in the living room, and there sits Mr. De Haas, the principal from the school that I knew. He cooperated with the Germans. Well, I thought that's the end. He reported me, and so I came in, and he said to me, oh, it's good to see you. And I just looked at him and didn't say a word. Maybe I couldn't get the words out of my mouth because I was so afraid. And he said, I'm so, oh no, then he said, get on your bike and I'll bring you somewhere. And Mr. Bezemer didn't say much. So I got on my bike, and he was on his bike, and I went to ride, and then I thought, now how can I get away from him? I looked at side streets everywhere to escape from him, because I thought he was bringing me to the Germans, or some office or wherever. And while we were riding, he said, Roosje, I'm so disappointed in you that you don't trust me. And I said, well, you belong to a German organization or in favor of Germans, and I cannot take any chances. And he said, well, I wouldn't do anything to harm you. I said, well, I can't take those chances. And I was just looking at the same time how to get away from him. He said, just relax, I'll bring you somewhere. So I kept riding, and then he brought me to a house in a not such rich neighborhood, but not bad. And on the second-story house, we had to go up outside stairs and then inside another stairs. And they brought me to the house of Mem. And that lady was a cleaning woman in the school where I used to go. And he said, no, Roosje, I leave you here. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. And Mem will take care of you. I called her Mrs. Diependahl at the time because I didn't know her. But she remembered me, seeing me in the school. And later on, I realized that I had seen her too, but she came after the school was out. So it's just a coincidence that she did remember me. And Mr. de Haas left, and I was by myself, of course. And then she said, oh, you come and stay with us. I said, do you realize what's going to happen? I said, I'm Jewish. She says, whenever I meet people, I never ask them their religion. I said, yeah, but ma'am, you take a big chance by taking us in. And she said, I want to help human beings, and you're more than welcome to come here. And furthermore, she said, my son is hidden here too, because he was forced to go to Germany as a forced labor. They are not Jewish, of course, but he refused to go. And so she got him false papers from a company who delivers milk and butter and stuff, so that would have protected him, but he was not officially working over there. He just got the papers and kept inside the house as long as possible. So she said, you'll be good company for him. But she acted like it was just nothing that she was doing. And I said, when do you want us to come? And she said, well, where you are now, it's too dangerous, your brother-in-law. I told her that. She said, come tomorrow. So I went home. And then I said, well, ma'am, but how much do we have to pay? Because Jan and Nell asked us a tremendous amount, which we had to pay anyway. And she said, I don't know. I said, you don't know? No, she said, because I'll just see at the end of the week after you hear how much more money we spent, and then we divide it. So, I mean, she was just so good. And there was something about her that gave you a feeling of relaxation. I cannot explain it. I never believe in things, you know, but there is something that I don't know, but she had it, whatever it is there is. So I came home, I said to Saul, you don't believe it, we have an address? Oh, that's great. So the next day we went there, and she couldn't be nicer, and she was still working at that time, because maybe she was up in her 50s at that time. And so we stayed there, and her son's name is Inze, it's Y-N-Z-E. He died a couple of years ago, but as long as he was in hiding and wanted to make some money, he made kind of little things at home, and Saul helped him. And I helped Mem with everything that I wanted to help. I mean, with Jan and Nell, I had to do this, I had to do it with Mem. Oh, no, I said, yes, I want to help you. So, and she had another son, too, but he was actually working every day, so we didn't get to know him too well. So it was, in the meantime, it was 1944, because we came there around Easter time, April. And after we were there a couple of weeks, I said to her, well, she asked us to call her Mem, because it was more familiar, more fun for her. Okay, call her Mem. And I had my birthday there, June 9th, so, oh, no, the biggest thing I forget, the invasion was June 6th. Nobody was allowed to have a radio, but that didn't bother her. She had a radio, and neighbors even came, which was dangerous for us, because, oh, no, you can trust me. She was such a good soul. So every day at BBC we were listening, and I still remember going, ta-ta-ta-ta, and then we were listening, and we almost crawled in there. And then one day, the invasion, June 6, 1944. Oh, thank God, we were so happy. Now that's the end of the war. I never even wanted to think that the invasion wouldn't be successful, but thank God it was. But at that time, oh no, it only a couple of days, we thought. And so it was a little bit, let me see, May, June, July, and then Mem said, you know, I have to go in the country. We have to get some more food because we don't have enough food. And you could always buy on the black market from the farmers. So she said, you know what I'll do? I'll go Thursday. I'll be back Saturday. And okay, so I cooked soup, and I went shopping at that time because you would think that the war was almost over. As a matter of fact, I went to one store to buy some vegetables, and somebody peeked at me from behind the window, and they lived behind the store. And that man comes out, and that was a friend of my parents, Jewish people who were hiding there. And they were so happy to see me. Oh, I'm so glad the war is almost over because, you know. And so I said goodbye. I said, oh, great. I said, well, I'm not coming back. Don't say hello to me. Don't come out. Don't chance it. And I walked back to the house, and it was on a Saturday, August the 5th. And we had lunch. I made some soup from that stuff that I picked up at the vegetable store. And we always said not to answer the doorbell. And Mem said, just let it ring a few times or a certain way or not. And then the doorbell rings at about 1 o'clock. And Inze, without thinking, opened the door. And until his death, he felt that he was guilty of getting us arrested. We had tried to tell him, it's not your fault. He was in hiding himself. He wouldn't do that. I should have waited because we had a deal to listen to a certain, well, but we could not convince him of that because he felt guilty about it, which is very sad because it wasn't his fault. So I said they lived on the second story, and then we heard the doorbell, and he pulled the cord to open the door, and Gestapo, and they ran upstairs. And I was out in the balcony in no time, playing with the rabbit. Saul was almost in the closet. And Inze was just there. He had his false paper. But they saw that Saul was almost in the closet, and I was out there. Now, what they were looking for was Mrs. Simons. And I tell you that Mem was so nice to that Mrs. Simons to give her address as a correspondence address. And he said, because that Mrs. Simons was married to a Jewish man. She was not Jewish. He was already sent back to Germany. But they had a lot of, they owned a lot of pictures and jewelry. I think they were jewelers in Holland. And Mem said, oh, sure, you can use my address for a correspondence. So in the meantime, Mrs. Simons didn't keep in touch with Mem. And one day, Mem got a letter about a week or 2 weeks before she left to buy the groceries. And in it said, Mrs. Simons has to appear at a certain place for the Gestapo to, I don't know for what, but maybe to tell where her husband was or where her belongings are. And Mem thought, oh, the heck with the Gestapo. She tore it up. And that day, on August 5th, while she was gone, the Gestapo came for Mrs. Simons, and instead of that, they found us. So I was on the balcony, I hear all that commotion going on. They were running around the house, and something went through my mind like, before you die, your whole life passes through. So I had that feeling at that time. I thought, well, that's the end now. What am I going to do? And I ran in the house, and the guy said, one of those German and Dutch police too, he said, what are you doing here? Are you a neighbor? And it flashed through my mind to say yes and walk out, but I didn't because I saw Saul and Inze, Mem's son, together, how do you call it, handcuffed, and they had the guns at him. So I went in the room and I said, and I heard Saul say, oh, that's it, that's the end, that's the end. And I ran in the room, and I remember wordly what I said. I said, don't think so. I said, you know the invasion has happened already, and the war will be over. And even though we go through a few days of hard time, we thought it would be a matter of days, don't let them get you down or something. So then they arrested us, guns at us, and took us to cars, put us in jail. But in the meantime, the Germans stayed there and checked the house. Never saw the radio because it was between some curtains. But the neighbor across the street who just listened with us to the BBC that same day saw what was going on. So he went outside and he was looking for Mem to come home because he knew exactly that she left. And Mem came, luggage, with beans and corn, I don't know, whatever, mice, whatever she had in flour. And the neighbor said, don't go in the house because the Germans are there. She said, it's my house. She went up there, took her luggage up one stairs, and then she tried to open the door, and then the guy, one of the Gestapo men, stayed behind and said, who are you? The Gestapo man said to her. And Mem said, that's what I want to know from you. It's my house. What are you doing here? And then he said, well, you know those people you have in your house, they're Jews, and we just arrested them. She said, didn't you know they were Jews? And he said, Mem said, I never ask anybody's religion. And we took your son too. She said, well, you better let him go because he has to go to work Monday. And she said, well, you're standing there, why don't you come down and help me carry that stuff upstairs? And he came down and carried the stuff upstairs for her. And what do you have in there? She said, food. And he says, you know you're not supposed to buy food. She said, well, if you Germans wouldn't steal everything here, I wouldn't have to buy food. I say that wordly because she told me that. And that's the kind of a woman she was. And she said, well, if we let your son go, we have to get you. Come and get you. He said, well, you can take me. I've not done anything wrong. Just helping people is not wrong. But what we did, he said, don't you know the Jews? He said, no. She said, I don't know. They lived on the coast, and they had to evacuate, and they were looking for a place to stay, and they came here. That's what we told each other that we would say in case something would happen. And she said, but you'd better let Inze go because he has to go to work. He had that little thing. He said, well, we come after you. So really, I'll tell you later what they did with us, but they let Inze go, and they came and picked her up. So for investigation, I don't know if she went to prison first. For investigation, they took her to Gestapo headquarters, which at that time were already more off the coast because they were afraid to have all those official buildings along the coast. So they took her there, and there was a town, Arnhem, and outside of Arnhem is a little town, very beautiful little town in the countryside. Felb, I think is the name. And they put her in the bus with about 7 or 8 other prisoners, and they were sitting in the bus, and Mem was sitting there, and all of a sudden they came close to that official building from the Gestapo, and so the police who were watching them got, get out, everybody get out. So the streetcar, they went a streetcar, not an official car from the Germans. So everybody got out, and Mem, instead of getting out, hid under the seat, hoping that nobody would report her. And that did happen. Nobody reported her. And that German guy was counting outside if he had all his prisoners. And in the meantime, the streetcars start going. So luckily, in that streetcar were people that did not report her right away. So she stayed there until the end of the line. She got out, and she got in a field of corn or wheat or whatever. She hid until it was dark. Again, luck. She walked to the first farmhouse, and she told the story because she had to go somewhere. And they told her, okay, we'll bring you somewhere. They were good people. They let us sleep and eat. We'll bring you to a castle because we know a lot of students are hiding there, the ones like who didn't want to work in Germany. They're in hiding, and you can help them out. She did, and that's how she survived the war. It was just, she's an amazing person. And when we came back from the war, I don't know if I should tell, I'll tell you about it. Saul was back on June 9th, and he came to Mem's house, and she said, oh, hi, how are you, Mr. DeLiema? Never called her Saul or Rose. She wouldn't think of that. And Saul said, you're not surprised to see me? No, she said, I knew you would be back. And Saul said, but I'm so worried Rose isn't back yet because I came back June 30, 1945. And he said, don't worry, she'll be back. Mem. Oh, shall I give her a name?
Yeah, her last name. Could we spell it? Diependaal?
Diependaal. D-I-E-P-E-N-D-A-A-L. But her maiden name is Visser, V-I-S-S-E-R, and she was married to De Boer, who is her first husband, who left her after he was an alcoholic, and she raised her 3 children, and they all made good in life. And Inze, her son, who was let go, they never came after him anymore. They never came back to the house anymore. They had other things in their mind because the invasion was going good. But I tell you, when we arrived in Auschwitz, I skip a little bit because I have to bring this up. We left Westerbork on the 2nd of September, and we came in Auschwitz, and they said, "What are you doing here? Holland is liberated." Holland was liberated in the meantime, but only the southern part of Holland. Because, remember, there was a big battle of the Bulge, on the big...
Could be.
No, that was part of it in Holland too.
Okay.
And the southern part of Holland was liberated a month before the end of the war. So in Auschwitz, they had heard rumors that Holland was liberated. So, but I think I skipped too much now. But I had to tell you a lot about Mem. And
she was an incredible woman, very...
She had meetings, and she contacted souls. And I'm not making it up, because after the war, she told me, "Rose, I still have so many meetings, calls, souls, and your mother wants to keep in touch with you. Get in touch with you." I said, "Listen, ma'am, if I would believe that, I would do that every day, and I would be a nervous wreck. And in addition to that, according to the Jewish religion, you're not allowed to call up the souls. You have to leave them." And I said, and my mother was such a religious person that I just cannot get myself to do that. And I know that my mother wouldn't want me, even though maybe she gets in touch with her. I don't know. But whatever Mem says, I believe, because she is such an honest... Saul had such back pain while he was in hiding. We couldn't go to a doctor because you didn't exist. So she said, "I'll help you," because she went to sick people to help him relieve the pain. And I said, "You help him, ma'am?" Yes, she said, "But you have to leave the room because I know you start laughing." You know, she was so down to earth, and then it won't work. Okay, so I left the room, and after 10 minutes she said, "You can come in now." Saul did not have back pain, and she was perspiring, and Saul said she didn't even touch him. She just went a little bit, I don't know what, but like I say, I don't believe in them, but there is something that we don't know.
How long were you with Mem?
We came with Mem in April of 44 until August 5th. And August 5th, we were sent to, I was sent to prison, the same prison as Saul in Holland. And they called that prison, during that time, Oranje Hotel. That means the Hotel of Orange, because all the prisoners were no criminals. They were all people who did something against the Germans. So we worked for the House of Orange, so that's how they called the Orange Hotel. And I came in my cell, all by myself, locked up, and it was a horrible feeling. And I thought, oh, poor Saul, you know, you think of each other more than he's all by himself in the cell. So Saul went in the cell, not with Inze, but with somebody else. And then he thought, oh, good, Rose is not alone in the cell. So, and then after it was about 5 days, you were treated bad, of course, just like you see in the movies, how you are in prison. And they would let you walk once a day. And then one morning they came, and I was afraid because you could see the German soldiers walking around, because that was all handled by the Gestapo and the German soldiers. They came, and I had to get out. I didn't have anything with me because we were only allowed to have a toothbrush or whatever. And I came in the hall there, and Saul and... I skipped the fact what happened in the house of Mem when I was arrested. There were also Dutch policemen with them. And after I made that statement from, oh, the war will be over soon, I had stomach cramps and I had to go to the bathroom. And the guy said, I have to go with you, I can't leave you alone. And so embarrassing in the first place, I had to go and sit there. And then he said, yeah, we know you're kind. You're going to commit suicide. I said, I would never give you that pleasure that I commit suicide. But I said, how can you stand there looking at me? And then he said, well, you know, you look familiar. It looks like, did you work for a nature reservation club years ago in school? I said, don't you tell me you belong to that with that skull. He had some kind of a dead head, you know, skull on his head. I said, don't tell me what you're doing now, that you ever belong to a nature reservation place. But anyway, I wanted to bring that in because... So then when they sent us in, and they had guns on us, and they brought us in a train, and they brought us to that little town of Velp, where Mem escaped in the streetcar.
Before we go to that in the prison road, let's back up a little bit to Mr. DeHaas, the principal of the school.
You want me to? Yeah.
Yes. Tell me more. He actually helped you to find a hiding place.
Yes, and then when we were arrested, my brother-in-law tried to get in touch with him to tell him what happened, and I don't know if he phoned him or that he went over to see him, and then he said, I don't want to hear about it, I don't want to know about it, I don't want anything to do with it. So when I came back after the war, I went back to my in-laws who survived the war by hiding, and when I found Saul back, one day a man came from the, some kind of a, I know the name in Dutch is opsporingsdienst. They were looking for people who were in hiding who cooperated with the Germans.
Collaborators?
Yeah, but that was, they tried to get hold of all the spies and people who collaborated with the Germans. And he came, there was some kind of a lawyer, representative or something, and he came with me, and he came from Mr. DeHaas, who was arrested because he collaborated with the Germans. But Mr. DeHaas told him that during the war, he helped a Jewish woman to find a hiding place. Now, I don't know if DeHaas did that to help me, or that he did it to clear his conscience, more or less. And I had to give a statement that he actually did that, and that I found Mem's connection through him. And then they reinstated him in the school where he used to be, and that's Mr. DeHaas.
So your testimony actually saved him then afterward.
Yeah.
We have a picture here of it looks like your school picture.
Yeah, secondary school, yeah.
And is Mr. DeHaas in there?
Yes, this is Mr. DeHaas.
Mm-hmm.
He was a tough teacher too, this one. And I'm sitting here.
Are there any other Jewish students in the class?
Yeah, this is a Jewish young man, this one.
Do you remember any names?
Van der Sluis, I think is his name. Schuppert is his last name. Selma van Praag. And this one is a Jewish boy, Cohen, Abraham Cohen. Yeah. And none of them survived. None of my classmates in that class survived. And then some people say, don't you feel guilty for surviving? And I think that is the most stupid statement, because my life is meant to go this way. I didn't do anything special. I was lucky, and I have a lot of willpower. And I feel that I have to talk about it as often and as much as possible.
We also have a picture of Mem.
Mem, yeah. That means mother in the language from the little community where she came from. Holland has 12 counties, you would call it, and she's from Friesland. And the people are known there for being honest, stubborn, outspoken. She could never tell a lie. She was special. We love her more, almost as much as I love my own mother. That's how she was for the short time that she knew. After the war, she came to visit us when Saul and I started our life over again. And she was just sitting there, and she gave me such a feeling of peace. And she said, you don't die, you go over. She believes in it. And it's great if you can do that. And I admire her for that.
She has a very strong face. Very,
so determined.
Yes. So very
and I bet you, she would say, oh, I'm listening. I know what you're talking about. Oh, keep talking. You know, that's how spiritually she has helped me, and my husband too, our whole life. Isn't that amazing? Even in camp, Mem said, you'll survive. And sometimes I thought, I think maybe I'd rather die, but no, Mem said, we'll survive.
She was very spiritual, but yet not religious in the way we think about it.
No, because she used to, and then because she couldn't pay her dues after her husband left her to the Catholic Church, I shouldn't say Catholic, to the church where she belonged to. They dropped her.
So after the Gestapo picked you up at Mem's house, you were taken to a prison, both you and Saul.
Yes, and then they sent us to Velp, the same place where Mem was, and then there was an interrogation. Inze was still with us then, because they wanted to find out if we could, to more information from other people. Don't you have any friends? because you Jews know everything from each other, and that's how it went. And then Inze made a remark to that guy. The guy, Inze told us later, he said, it's pretty stupid that you and your mother didn't know that they were Jews. He said, how can you make that statement? Because when we were arrested, the guy who arrested us made a remark to Rose, and he said, what are you doing here? Are you a neighbor? So if he would have known right away that she was Jewish, he wouldn't have made that statement, which was good. I forgot about it, but he mentioned that to us. So then the interrogation itself was pretty bad. I mean, not a beating or anything, but trying to persuade you to give him more information about friends and relatives. That's why my mother-in-law, for instance, we never knew exactly the address where my mother-in-law and her husband were, because then they couldn't get it out of you, so you didn't want to know that. And then they combined everybody and sent us to Westerbork. And in Westerbork, we got to meet the Frank family, Otto Frank, and the whole group from het Achterhuis from Amsterdam, because they were arrested August the 4th. Achterhuis, it is the Anne Frank house, because they were hiding in the back of the office building. So in Holland they called it. So we met there, everybody, the Van Daans, no, their names was really Van Pels, but in the book they call them Van Daan. But anyway, Mr. and Mrs. Frank and Margot and Anne, very reliable, nice people. And all we did was say, well, can't last long. They put us to work in Westerbork, and during the day, husband and wives, or people, men and women, could be together. So what we had to do is they had whole, actually, hills of used batteries, and we had to sort the batteries. And then another group would open the batteries, and they would use the black stuff that's inside to, I don't know for what, but they were reusing that black stuff in there. But thank goodness we got the job of sorting the batteries. And I'll tell you why we got that so-called good job. Mr. Blick was in camp, and he found out that we arrived, so that he assigned us to a better part, because we were S cases. That means punishment, straf. It means punishment, because we did something against the Germans. We went in hiding. We didn't just go. So they said, oh, that's much more dangerous, and you get punished much worse than the other Jews, which was a lot of baloney, because as soon as we were over the border, they killed everybody if they had a chance. So, yeah?
Why did Mr. Blick have this power in the camp?
Because he was kind of, he worked for the Jewish Council, and that whole group had a privileged position because they cooperated with the Germans. All the Jewish councils did, which, if it would never have existed, I don't know if more Jews would have survived. I don't know. But maybe in the back of their mind, and they had Jewish councils all over Germany and everywhere, maybe they thought, oh, if we cooperate, they won't be that mean. So when his group finally, after we came there, I don't know exactly what happened to Mr. Blake, what date and when they were sent to Westerbork, but apparently they dissolved the Jewish council, and sent them all to Westerbork. So when he found out, he put us there where those, and it happened at the Frank family there. So what we were sitting on the batteries and sort them and talk. And we were not sad, we were just hoping, keeping our spirits up, saying it cannot last any longer. And then, September the 2nd was the last transport from Auschwitz. The day before, the morning, I don't know exactly, German Gestapo came in barracks, and everybody in our special barracks, because we were punished, so-called, in Holland. They gave us a different treatment than the others. They took everybody. And so I remember going in the cattle cars. But Saul is always taking good care of me. So he said, you know what, I'll try to get some relaxing pills or whatever, or nerve pills, because I don't want you to be so nervous. So he went to wherever they had those, and they had some kind of not a drugstore, but a place where they had some pills or whatever. So he asked the girl who was supposed to go on transport, and she gave him the wrong pills. And what did she do? She gave him 3 sleeping pills. I didn't know, so I said, take them. That's good for you, you're relaxed. Okay, so I took 3 sleeping pills. Because of that, I was almost unconscious in the cattle car, which would have been a terrible danger when I would arrive there, because anybody who was sick or old or children would have been killed right away. So he meant well, but it almost didn't work. But he stayed with me all the time. And, well, I don't have to tell you how it is to be locked up in a cattle car, because everybody rides, but it's just a nightmare. And they were saying, where are we going? No, we didn't know anything. And there was one woman after 2 nights, and 2 nights and 2 days, I think. But I was hanging in there. There was one bucket, and I don't have to go into details how bad that is. And they opened the doors, and then, I don't know where, what station, I don't know. But anyway, when we arrived in, when we came closer to Poland, one woman peeked out the window, and I said, oh my God, I think they sent us to Auschwitz. And Saul, we heard things, but we didn't want to believe it. And Saul said, don't tell anybody, don't spread it. Rumor. Oh, and I have to tell you one thing, in one wagon, cattle car, not in ours, some of the younger people, what they did is, you had your luggage with you, because in Westerbork, you had everything you could take. The regular, we didn't, because we were in hiding, and we were not allowed to take anything. But other people who were just picked up from the house took as much as possible, like blankets and stuff. So they built a little things. I wasn't there, so I heard that from people who survived it. They broke planks, wood, opened it up, and they dropped themselves through that until when we were still in Holland, not in Germany or in Poland, but when we were just left. And so they fell on the railroad track, just hoping that they were lucky. So one lost his leg, one lost the arm. Some of them were killed. I don't know how many did that. But they tried, so again, to say they just went and didn't try to get out of it. And I have even known, I cannot think of the name now, who survived that ordeal, but they never ended up in Auschwitz. So when we came closer to Auschwitz, we could look outside a little bit through to the cattle car, and you saw bodies running back and forth. Because they heard there another transport was coming, and we were the last transport to leave Holland. And we got out, and all kind of Jewish prisoners, capos, helped us out. And they said, give to us whatever valuables you have, because they take everything away from you. They were forced to work there. Now, you would say, that's terrible that they do that. I think it's terrible, but how many years maybe did they survive the camp? They didn't have any choice. Okay, maybe they lined up 10 Jewish people. They say, you have to work for us. Maybe 9 said no, but the 10 said, well, I'll take a chance. And I personally, I don't know if I ever could have done it, but I'm not that person who is in that position. I know one thing. And when I was in Auschwitz, and one day we went to the barrack where they get your food, and you were trying to help out, because then you could steal some of the stuff that might be in the soup. There are 2 girls standing outside there. Esther and Leah Flinkier. They are people from Poland who escaped to Holland. They were arrested. They were sent back to Poland. He was standing there, and she had, how do you call it when you hit a horse with or whatever?
A whip.
A whip.
A crop.
And I look at her, and I said, are you Esther Flinkier? I said, don't you dare hitting me. And she said, oh, I wouldn't hit you, but that's the only way that I can survive, she said. So, and her sister did the same thing. I don't know how they could have done it, and I don't say they did the wrong thing, did the right thing, but you must lower yourself by a lot to be able to do that. And they were 2 Dutch girls, girlfriends for my sister, so I'm not wrong with the identity. I've never heard any more about them. I haven't looked for them either, because who am I to say that they were forced to? And what the big danger was too in Auschwitz was that there were capos who would hurt you. Jewish couples. And when the Germans came closer, they acted up more forceful than they should because they want to make a good impression on the... So it is so hard to say that everybody reacts the same to terrible circumstances. And I remember one time we went to a sauna, but they take everything away from you again. There was a mountain of bread, all molded bread and everything. And we came in there, and we didn't wear anything because with the sauna they take everything away from you. All those women threw themselves on the bread to eat a little bit. I couldn't make myself do it, and none of the little group that I belonged to. Maybe because we were just recently in prison. I don't know. But it was the worst sight that I've ever seen, how the women fought among themselves to get a piece of bread. Now, where shall I go? Now, when we arrived in... okay, I have to tell you one more thing about a woman who was in Westerbork and a little boy who was in Westerbork. No connection. But the boy was found hiding with non-Jewish people, and this lady didn't have any children. So we heard rumors that mothers and children right away go to the gas gym, which happened because when we got out, thank goodness the air awoke me and that I was aware of what was going on, that I wasn't faint anymore. She pretended it was her boy because she wanted to protect the child. Oh, good. You go with the other people in the cars. Well, those cars went straight to the gas chambers. You never know. Her life was gone because she wanted to do a good deed to protect the child, which was not her child. And the things that I tell you, it's, while I'm telling it to you, it's hard to imagine that that can happen. For instance, the family that my brother was with, who reported himself to Vught, to that camp, were transported eventually to Westerbork and on to concentration camps. And they had a little boy, Johnny Stern was his name. Darling, my brother was crazy about him. And so they were in Vught, and the transport came, and then his father, Sam Stern, I know him real well, he went to ask the captain from the camp if he could stay because his little boy was so sick. He said, oh, I'll come and take a look. Came and took a look. He said, that's okay. If he dies on the way over, just throw him out the train. And that's what happened. So he died. I think they kept him with them and buried him somewhere. But the parents never talked much about him because I still correspond with the mother. The father and the mother survived. They went to Theresienstadt and they survived. So when we arrived in Auschwitz, I don't know if I go the way you want me to. Yeah?
You're doing fine.
We came in Auschwitz. Men and women were separated. Big dogs jump up to everybody. Well, until this day, I have a few hang-ups from Auschwitz. Until this day, I'm afraid of big dogs, German shepherds, and I try to overcome it because I see them walk with blind people, but I cannot help. And also, I also have the hang-up about, I want to know what I have to do next, because they try to get you down mentally as well as physically in Auschwitz. So when we came there, separated, so I didn't see Saul anymore until after the war. Never heard from each other. And we went to barracks, and then I saw some girls, the same girls, the Flinkier girls. They saw me coming in the camp, and at night she brought me some bread. So she had possibilities to get stuff. And it was a matter of survival. A lot of people worked in the places, they called that Canada. I could never figure out why they called that Canada, where everybody came with all the stuff, and they took everything. You didn't get to keep anything. But they had to sort all that, and the people who worked there took whatever they could use, like underwear and everything, because what they did with that, they came in a camp, and all I was wearing was a rag for a dress, and no underwear, nothing. So from that little piece of bread that you get, you had to save a little bit to try to exchange it for something to wear. So, and that other part of bread you try to keep for the next morning for your breakfast. And you know where you kept that piece of bread? In your dirty shoes that you use as a pillow, so nobody of the other prisoners would steal it. People were not human beings anymore. And I don't say that we, as our group, behaved better, but the fact that we came so late might have acted more as human beings, because how can people do certain things? So in Auschwitz, we were counted and counted, and every morning, it was winter time, September, October, November, no, September and October I was in Auschwitz. You stand outside and they come and count. How many, how many, many? Okay, and then of course you got your number on your arm right away when you came, but later on when other prisoners would see that, they said, you're lucky because that means they put you to work. But actually if you did get in it, because the others went straight to the gas chambers. That's why I don't understand that they still have records, because they have names and birthplace of people who were killed right away. Even for my parents, because when I was in Yad Vashem, I looked up the information that they had about my parents, and it says exactly the dates that they were shipped there. So they must have kept so many records of it. And for I don't know if it's important to know the number, but my number is A-25170.
Maybe if you could hold your arm up.
Yeah.
And, well, we could get it on camera.
It's kind of light, you know. It's not. And Sal's number is B9239. I don't know if it means anything that Anne Frank has a number very close to mine, because you want me to tell you more about. Oh, I hope it's all wrinkled. It's my age.
Were Anne Frank and family in the same car as you?
Well, the car that we went, I don't remember much. It could be, but no. When we arrived, be like this. You know that Max, my youngest son, when he was 2 or 3 years old, and he played with us in bed in the morning, and then he said, when does that grow in my arm? Because he thought it was part of human beings. Isn't that something? But, so, what I want to, so when we came, it's just like arriving in hell. That's how I always say Auschwitz was, with the lights, people running around. And those people were the prisoners who were there trying to get some information, to get some food, to get, after being there, you understand what they were doing.
Your transport was everybody from Holland?
No, from whoever they had assembled in Westerbork. Now, I don't know. I think there were 1,200. Now, my numbers might be wrong. And only 500 came in Auschwitz. The others were murdered right away. And then the next day, I said to that girl from Flinkier who gave me some bread, I said, where are all the other people from our transport? And she said, do you see the flames up there in the tower? She said, that's where your other part of you, because they must have been there longer and they know more about what was going on. So what are you going to do? Stand outside. You hear rumors. You didn't get a blanket, one of those horse things, and 11 in a row, 11. Well, you have seen those pictures. So you're standing there, counting, okay, everybody. And then you stand. What are you going to do? You stood against the wall. We take turns. And we talk, and we talk, and we encourage each other. And Anne and her mother and her sister Margot were very close. And Anne got along with her mother very well, because I always want to bring that out, because they always say, oh, she had problems. No, she was marvelous. But under circumstances, she was hidden in upstairs as a teenager. So that must have been hell for her to be in hiding all that time. So now one time, always they came by and they checked stuff. Why? They didn't tell you. They didn't tell you. They let you stand outside, mud all over the place. I understand people go and visit Auschwitz now. It's nice and green. Nothing grew. I'm sure that they took it out on purpose. And so to keep warm, we would try to keep warm, we would go in the place where everybody went to the bathroom. Now you have to picture those bathrooms like, you know, pieces of wood from here until there, with a hole here and a hole there and a hole there, 3 rows, and you had to crawl on top of it, and everybody had to do whatever. And it was warmer there because the body warmed from the people. But then, rouse, you had to get out. Nobody moved, but they did get us out because they had a long stick with, say, an empty coffee can. They stuck it in the junk and they threw it all over us. and then washing, or you couldn't wash yourself. They turned on the water. You were not allowed to drink the water. Oh, sure, they wanted you to drink the water because you would get dysentery and you would die soon. And if they would see that everybody was in that washroom to try to wash, no soap, no towel, nothing, no toilet paper, nothing, then they would turn off the water. Now you were wet and it was cold outside. Well, then they assembled everybody. Then you had to go and pick up rocks, walk in line, go to a certain spot, and walk back. Put them somewhere else. Everything to get you down. And they came and checked you and picked out people who were too weak. And then one time, Margot or Anne, either one, had some kind of an infection on the arm. And the Gestapo woman took her out. And then the other girl, either Margot or Anne, because I don't know which one had that infection, said she didn't feel good because she didn't want her sister to be all by herself in the sick barracks. As a result, they didn't stay with us. We went to a labor camp and we had a chance to survive. They stayed in Auschwitz. They evacuated the camp. Eventually, January, I think, they sent them all to Bergen-Belsen. And they died from diphtheria. Is that right? Yeah, diphtheria. And the mother collapsed in Auschwitz, and she died in Auschwitz. And Mr. Frank was in a hospital, January 27, and my husband was in that same hospital. And the camp was liberated. No, the Russians came real close, and they were going to evacuate the camp. So they said, everybody line up outside. We're going to evacuate the camp, and the sick people are going to be blown up here with the barracks. So my husband thought, oh, I'm going to go outside. He weighed 90 pounds. He struggled outside, and anybody who would move from the lines would be shot and killed. So then something happened that somebody moved him back in the barracks, and he said his mind was not working anymore because he figured, well, I'm going to lie here, and if they're going to blow it up, I'll put the mattress over my head so I protect myself. And the evacuation took place. They found a mass grave out, I don't know how many miles outside of the camp Auschwitz, but I don't know how many hundreds of bodies from the people who were in that evacuation. And the Germans, who were supposed to blow up the barracks, got afraid because they were afraid that the Russians would surround the camp. They took off without blowing up the sick barracks, and that's how the sick people died. And you know who was in that evacuation and who survived it? Rabbi Goldstein. Because Saul told Rabbi Goldstein what happened to him. And a few of them, I don't know if he was with the, but he was still in Auschwitz around that time. And he has a special feeling for Saul, you know, as far as that goes. And then after the war, yes.
Let's back up a little bit. And you were in Auschwitz for about 2 months?
I was in Auschwitz from September the 4th until October 29. We had a selection, and you get the selection, and you don't know what it's for. That's why I always say I have to always know what's ahead of me, because we have had other selections. They picked us up, go and walk. They brought us in front of the gas chambers. By that time, we knew where the gas chambers were. That happened 3 times. Now I know I didn't go in, but at that time you think that's the end. And for some reason, when we arrived, and our group arrived in Auschwitz, for some reason they didn't shave our head. They only cut it short. And we came in and everybody had shaved heads. We couldn't understand, but I don't know what reason it was. The next selection, they took us and they shaved our head again. Now nobody wanted to go to another selection because you have accumulated some underwear, you have exchanged some bread for something to wear, so your head built up a little. And if you go to a selection again, you lose everything. So there was one woman who escaped from that selection, and she hid in somewhere in the barracks. So when we came at the selection center, they counted us, and there was one short. And they were upset and running around like crazy. And there was actually one short. We didn't know who. So when we came back, we were all shaved. We looked terrible. We didn't recognize each other almost from without hair. We came back in camp. They start counting again. And there were, say, 100 instead of 99. And then they said, well, somebody didn't go there. But everybody was bald, so... And then we had to stay there all night, and we had to... First, they asked if somebody would report who... No, yell, not ask, yell at us. And then we had to kneel, keep our hands up, and lift up that rag or whatever they had, so they could see if everybody was shaved in their private parts. And that's how they found the lady who didn't go. And she happened to be a Dutch lady, German Dutch lady, Hechte, I think was her name. And I'm still surprised that they didn't kill her, but they beat her so bad that she was deaf for the rest of her life. So those things happen. There was one woman who took some potatoes from the kitchen, and they caught her. I cannot call it stealing. You just had to try to stay alive. They caught her. They put her. That's the things that I've seen in my own eyes. Put her in the middle. We all had to come up, surround her from a distance. They ordered buckets of boiling water, and they threw it over her, and we had to stand there and watch. You know, you don't know how that you're still normal after going through that. Well, people hanging, that was just, I didn't know why, but there was another body hanging. You didn't see that they pulled them up, it was hanging. I can go on and, oh yeah, the first days you look and you don't know what's going on. I see a wagon there, and then I see somebody throwing something. Oh my God, dead bodies. They piled them up on the wagon. I got sick of myself from looking at it. A couple of days later, I saw that same wagon come around. I looked, and I thought, oh, there's that wagon again. And after 2 weeks, I didn't even pay any attention to the wagon. So something happens to your way of thinking in your mind to protect you from feeling that bad every time. But I don't know what it is. And the fact that you come through this thinking that you're normal, and the way the rest of our life has gone, I think we are, but it's a terrible experience. And we have positive things out of it. I told you that we appreciate everything, every minute, every day. And we are kind of impatient with people who are never satisfied, always find complaints about everything.
When you were in Auschwitz, did you have any word of Saul?
No. At one time a man came and he said, I saw your husband 2, 3, 4 days ago. But when Saul came in Auschwitz, they said, oh, you're from Holland? Oh, you guys are too weak. You'll never make it. And when Saul came in Auschwitz, he had his glasses on. One of the prisoners said to him, I'll hit that off your face in a couple of days. And he did. So, I mean, I tell you, when we went to Israel in 1976 for a visit, and we arrived with El Al in Lod Airport, there was a strike going on.
Rose, I'm going to interrupt you for a second because we're at the end of the tape, and we'll pick up. We will now take a short break.
Okay. I think I should call Saul.
Of the Rose DeLiema testimony. Let us resume. When we stopped to change tape, we were discussing your experiences and Saul's experiences in Auschwitz. Is there anything you'd like to add about that time?
Yes, I think I mentioned on the last tape that I was reminded of Auschwitz, which was very depressing for me when we arrived in Israel, because we were all trying to get a little bucket or a basket to put our luggage in. And there was so much arguing between the people in different languages. Hungarian, German, Polish, Dutch, and it was really, people were nervous and anxious to get the luggage, and everybody's on edge. And I panicked there because I was closed in that place, and so it was a bad experience. But after that, the visit to Israel made it all good again. But it's still It was too bad that that happened for us because, like, you say, oh, you go to Israel, oh, thank God, and everybody was arguing and fighting, more or less fighting with each other with words and elbows, you know. Well, I can tell, I told you about Saul, how he survived, and then Mr. Frank, I think he came back through Odessa. But after the liberation, the Russians came to, were in Auschwitz, and they wanted the prisoners to help them, the ex-prisoners, the Jewish people who were there. So they were very good to build up their strength because, like I say, Saul weighed 90 pounds, and he had to help with sorting the people, and there were a lot of people who died at the very last, and he remembered sickness broke out, and then he got sick catching it from somebody else, but anyway, they used him to help the Russians, to help the Jewish people getting some food, because the Russians supplied them with enough food. And then the war was almost over. No, a couple of, well, he didn't know it at the time, but they were evacuated to a little town, Pilsen, and the Russians kept them all over there, Pilzen, and Czechoslovakia, I think it was. And they got them all together there. And then one day, they took all they blacked the windows, the curtains down, because the war was over, and that was May 5th, or 7th, maybe it was different dates that happened. And Saul had to play for the Russians, the Russian anthem. Saul plays piano. Whenever you tell him to play a certain tune, he can play it, which is great. Sadly enough, after the war, he's not interested in playing the piano anymore. But he can play anything, so he remembered that, and they were so excited. But of course, all the prisoners were anxious to go to the country where they came from. Now, we were lucky enough to come from Holland, where we could go back. But a lot of survivors couldn't go back to their countries because they were still anti-Jews. As a matter of fact, Saul walked somewhere outside Auschwitz, outside the camp, right after the liberation. And all of a sudden, what do I hear behind me? And they were calling Jit or something like Zit. I don't know how they say Jew. They were calling him names. So those people could not go back to their country. And so we were lucky enough to go back to Holland. But how do you get to Holland right away? So yes?
Were you in Auschwitz when the Russians came?
No, I was sent to a labor camp. Should I tell you that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So in October, in the meantime, Anne and her sister went to the sick barracks, and they ended up in Bergen-Belsen. Now, on October 29, there was a selection, or the 28th, because we were sent on the 29th. Pick you up. Didn't tell you what happened, of course, or what was going to happen. And they brought us to some barracks where there quilted blankets. They gave us a coat. They gave us, not new, but all old stuff. But they gave us an overcoat. They gave us more or less shoes to wear and dresses. And we couldn't figure it out. And one of my friends, we stayed a lot together with the Dutch group, and one girl, she was 18, 19 years old. She's a very well-known girl now in Holland because she writes a lot and talks a lot about the Holocaust. And she said, you know what, they let us sleep real good one night, and tomorrow they send us to the gas chamber. And I was always the one, they tell me that, I don't make that up, that I encouraged them not to believe the worst, always think that. I said, oh, come on, that's not true. I didn't know it was true or not. And then the following day, and we slept. We never slept so good because there were, I think there were two to a barrack or something. And then the next day they put us in cattle cars, closed of course, but they gave us big piece of bread and we got some sausage or whatever. And they treated us more like human beings. Where did we go? I don't know. We didn't know where we went. So the train brought us to a little town named Libau in Upper Silesia, I don't know exactly. And later on, when I checked the word Libau, that's a Jewish word for heart. It doesn't have anything to do with it. When we were in the temple, And we sing that, and oh, Liebau, yeah, it was a good place to go. So we arrived there, and we came in a place, and it smelled like wood. It was a factory where they work on wood. I say that because whenever I smell fresh wood, that's where I am. But also smelled like delicious soup. And we got a bowl of soup we hadn't had for all the time, we even never saw it. And we looked at each other, oh, that's great. So a group of us was taken and put to work in that factory with the barracks close by. And we were sent to another one, and the name of that one was Nordland, the name of the factory. And what they made over there was chains for, the snow chains for cars. And we had to assemble them, heat them together, how do you call it? Not heat them.
Weld.
You weld them together with machines. And that was for the German military. So it was just a relief to be there. We slept two on the side, two at each other, and we stayed together, and it was so great. I mean, compared to Auschwitz. Mm. And then in that factory, we worked with material which was brought around by forced labor people who were not Jewish, who lived in the town of Liebau, who were brought there from Holland and from France. And one of the people who worked there was my friend Kino. I still write him, and until this day I have to answer him a letter. And his name is not Kino, his name is Jean Bouchard. And he lived in France. And
is this his picture?
That's Jean Bouchard, yeah.
Oh.
And he would walk around there, and for some reason he knew that I spoke French or understood French. And then he would bring the material around, and he would throw it on the table. The Gestapo women were sitting around. And then he would sing like, Alouette, chante, Alouette, and he would sing, oh, La Russe sont 60 kilomètres de Berlin, or something. The Russians are 60 kilometers from Berlin. So I would tell that to the girls. Or he would tell me that he had a piece of bread hidden in the factory for me. And so that was just great, that you had a human contact, that you could hear words that were true. And the German supervisors who watched over us, Gestapo women, I could tell by that time they were all sick and tired of the war. I mean, they were mean to us, but like again, no comparison to Auschwitz. And at Christmas time, yeah, it was Christmas. The owner of the factory wanted to treat all of us, and he gave us all a piece of lard. And we are not supposed to eat lard, I know, but we had one woman with her, Lydia Birnbaum Hausdorff, darling lady. She was a little bit older in my eyes. She was about 50, in the 50s. I was 24 around that time. And she was very religious. And she said, you can eat it. We have to eat it because it might save you. So we did eat it. And she knew all the Jewish holidays. We knew exactly. And how we spent our time in the barracks was telling about our family. And we told each other the address, who to contact after the war in case one of us wouldn't survive. And in that whole time that I was there, that was from October 29 until the liberation, only one girl passed away, and she had a lung disease, Teta Cohen. And she was, they put us on better clothes, and they let us bury her in the town Liebau. I don't know if the family ever, I'm sure that somebody in Holland must have told the family about it, but that was the only casualty, actually. They didn't kill us there, and that was so important.
Is this a postcard of Liebau?
Kino sent that to me, yeah. That's a postcard, and I don't know exactly where the factory is, but let me tell you about what happened in the factory. We worked, and you're supposed to do 5 chains on this side and 5 chains on the other side. But we wanted to sabotage them a little bit. So what we did, 4 on this side and 7 on that side, so it wouldn't fit on the wheel. But that was our sabotage. But pretty soon they ran out of material. They didn't have anything to work on. So they figured we could build a landing strip for airplanes in that neighborhood, in the hills, see the hills over there, mountains, whatever. I don't even know the names of those mountains or anything. So every morning we had to line up, walk, and we could have gone around the mountain like this, but we had to go like that. But I always told myself, it was very hard to do, but we were a little bit stronger then because we got a little bit more food. But what I always did is, and I do it until this day, if I walk up a hill, I always look down, not to see how much longer I have to go up, see, because it was forever and ever that you, so to make it easier on me, I never wanted to know how far I still had to struggle to get up there. And then we would arrive there, and then our supervisors, our Gestapo ladies, would have their breakfast, and they would toast bread and would fry eggs. Well, we didn't, of course we didn't get anything, but at least we could compare our existence in Libau with the terrible nightmare of Auschwitz. So it gave us strength to hold on and not to give up. So then we needed rocks to make that landing strip. So they had dynamite, had to let it explode in the hills there. We had to pick up the rocks, walk, and make a landing strip. And one time we went to work, and the flags were half-mast. We didn't know. Of course, you didn't hear any news, nothing, except, and now I didn't have to contact with Kino because we didn't go to the factory anymore. And then we found out, I think from Kino that he came by, that Hitler died, because he was dead before, at the end of the war, around the time that Roosevelt died. And so that really gave us courage. So the next Saturday we went to our work again, and usually they let us have a break in the afternoon while they were eating their lunch, and then they didn't order us to go back to work, direct back to the barracks. And I thought, what's going on? We didn't know. And that was May 4th, maybe. And we walked back, and who comes by on his bicycle? Kino. And he yells real loud, "C'est la paix, c'est la paix." I told the girls, some of them also knew French, so that was, it's peace. But we were still in their hands. So, but the woman who was in charge of our camp did, she ordered poison to put in our last meal. And thank God, the poison was not delivered to the camp in time to put in our soup. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here talking about it. So that's how your life depends on small things.
Were all of the people in this camp female?
Yes. And so then the woman in charge wanted to escape, and she took a few Jewish girls or ladies with her in case she would run into the Russians, that she could say, oh, she was good because here, see, she has some. Now, I don't know the nationality of the ones that she took, maybe the ones who spoke the language from that section, I don't know. But then came, so then we were there. Nobody was there. What are we going to do? We were afraid to move. So the first thing was that we looked around for food because we were still hungry, even though it was better over there. But everybody was afraid to go in the little town. And then all of a sudden, some Russian soldiers came in, and they came in the camp, put us around in a big circle, and one was a Jewish captain. I don't know if they were all Jewish, and he took his pistol. A lot of the Gestapo women were still there, only the woman in charge left. And he stood there with his gun, and he said, the war is over. You're all free. And here are, oh no, and then we started singing your national anthem, and everybody sang the national anthem. And that's when I cried and laughed at the same time, because it was unbelievable. It was such an emotional moment. And then he said, now here are some German women. Do whatever you want to them, and I will not stop you. And none of us moved. None of us did anything to them. Not the Czech, not the Hungarian Jewish women, not the Dutch, not the German Jewish women. Nobody did, even though they deserved a lot to be punished for, but we couldn't make ourselves do it. There were also things going on that the German Gestapo women picked some of the women prisoners to have a relationship with lesbian relationship. And it was horrible to know that that took place, but thank God I was never exposed to that, except after the war, but I'll come to that a little later. That the Russian soldiers wanted to grab Jewish ex-prisoners, or not because we were Jewish ex-prisoners, we were prisoners or women, but we didn't look much like women, we looked terrible. Because Kino, I remember him saying when we came in the camp, he said, I thought it was a bunch of monkeys coming in the camp because we were all looked so terrible. So there we were. In the meantime, we had lice and no clothes, so I don't know exactly what we did. We tried to wash some blankets, we tried to make something with a hole in the middle, let it hang over our head. I really don't remember that. But then the Russians came every night to try to grab some women in the camp. I said, well, we're not safe here anymore, what are we going to do? Oh, and then Kino, and there was some Dutch forced labor in the camp. They took care of it, that we got something to eat. And what did they do? They took a horse from the meadows. They found a horse somewhere. They butchered him. They made the best soup and meat for us. Delicious. That was my first meal. And that was on a Sunday, and we were sitting there. And well, they warned us not to eat too much right away because it would have been bad. But we were sitting there in the camp eating that food. And then all of a sudden, a farmer walks around. And he asked the guys if they had seen a horse walking around. And they said, no, we didn't, but why don't you join us for dinner? Where we were eating his horse. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I remember real well. And so what are you going to do? We were sitting there, the Red Cross didn't show up for weeks, and we were hoping that the Red Cross. And then we made a mistake, I made a mistake, and that little group of ours, Kino and his friends said, well, we're not going to sit around here and wait. We're going back to France and to Holland. If you guys want to go with us, we'll protect you. And they did. And we decided, yes, about 6 girls walked for about 3 weeks through Germany, not realizing that all the railroad tracks were broken. And they really did protect us. One time, I was walking with Kino. We had blisters. And one of the girls especially had blisters, but they were such gentlemen because they knew what we went through. And whenever the Russians came around, they pretended like Kino was my friend, but they acted just so decent. And then one time, in a little town, Bunzlau, they stopped that. Nobody was allowed to go on his own because it was, you saw people along the street, dead, horses, everything. And then at night, we didn't have any money. At night, we stopped at a farmhouse and said, could we sleep here? And they wanted it then, because then if the Germans came, they could say, well, we have Jews here who sleep, well, who sleep. So we're good for the Jews, you know. They had white sheets hanging out the window. So we came in, and then one of the girls in our group, she was very strong, and we said, we want milk in German. You know. Oh, we don't have any. We just milk the cow. Milk him again. And we didn't pay for anything. We had a little permit before that we could walk, and we went to the butcher. We need meat. And he said, it's that much. No, the Russians, they will pay you. And they showed us. He couldn't read it. We couldn't read it, what was on there. He gave us meat. And then you can have, no, they'll come and pay you. So it was terrible situation. But we had to live. We had to manage somehow. And then finally in Bunzlau, they collected all the people that were walking all over the country, and they said, well, here we're going to get trains and we'll send you to your destination. Well, that was still under the Russians, and that was not far from Leipzig. And we were still under the Russians, but we wanted to get out there to go to the west more. And then we went in a big house. Nobody lived there because they all escaped because they were afraid of the Russians. So they tried to escape, the Germans who lived there. Oh, we went over the closet, we tried to get stuff. I never ate that much rhubarb because it was growing in the little gardens, and we managed it. Dishes we threw out the window, and we didn't even wash anything. And then the first one who had a birthday, well, after liberation, was I, June 9, 1945. And that was the day that Saul managed to get back to Holland. I didn't know that. And then in the morning, Kino said, we go for a walk. And what the other girls and the fellows did, they picked all kinds of flowers, and the house was decorated so beautiful when I came back, all the flowers there. And of course we had rhubarb that day or whatever. And in the middle of the day, we all had to go to the railroad station because they said they had a train and it was going to go. So we buy flowers and we left. We slept on the ground. The men slept in one room. Oh, and on that farmhouse, in one of the farmhouses, in the middle of the night, the Russians stopped and the soldiers came in our room, and the women slept in one room and the men in the other. And they heard a commotion, and Kino and the guys came out of their room in that farmhouse. And that Russian soldier was sending us out with a gun, and 2 Russian soldiers came in our room. He grabbed the blankets, and thank God the captain from that group was a civilized Russian commander, and he heard what was going on. We were screaming and yelling, and he came in the room there, and he yelled at his guys at this, so nothing happened. But we girls all hang on to the captain, 6 of us. We were so afraid of them. And then we couldn't talk to him because he spoke Russian, and he said, and he had a headache, and so that's what we figured out. He had a headache, so we had some aspirin. I don't know where we got it from. He said, he didn't want to take it. I said, I took one, he took one too. So we were just hanging on to him, clinging on to him, and then he could tell that we were so afraid that he took off by taking also all the cars and the cows from the farmer where we stayed that night. And they also took Kino's watch, the Russians. But the next morning, the farmer was not interested anymore to allow us to sleep in it because everything was stolen. But where was it now? In Bunzhou. Oh, yeah. So in Bunzhou, we went to the railroad station and waiting in the cars, there's cattle cars, but open, you could see outside. But the locomotive didn't come. And it turned out that the conductor from the locomotive, machinist, how you call that, was drunk, so he had to go back again. So it took another week. All we did in that time was looking up lists from Red Cross to see names that were familiar. Not that I had any hope for my family. On the contrary, I always say, and I hope, that they were sent straight to the gas chambers. After coming there, knowing, I know they could never survive. So that would be the only way out that would have been better for them than to hang around in the concentration camp. And then June 16, we finally got on our way back to Holland, to Limburg. That's the southern part. So some people had to go to France, and that was, we were going home. And I'm sorry to say, it was beautiful scenery in Germany, so we could look at all the scenery, but a lot was damaged too. But we saw the countryside because those trains took forever and ever because it was not organized, because so many railroad tracks were stolen. So it took us another 3 weeks to get to our destination in Holland. And when we got there, there were a lot of spies who were cooperating with the Germans who were trying to get back in Germany. So the custom office in Limburg were very strict to thank you to not to let any spies in. But we didn't have any problem because they saw our number and they knew. And so they were very good to us. And then we were in Maastricht. Oh, Maastricht, you know that name? Yeah, that was the town that I came. And but I wanted to go to The Hague, and my friend Rosie Rosenberg, who I was with all the time, she wanted to go to Rotterdam, and the other girls want to go to their destination. So there came a guy, and he said, "Did you want a lift from me? I live in Rotterdam." So, oh, good. So we were in his car. I don't know what he was, a pharmacy. He said, "Oh, you girls survived the camp. Oh, if you want a job, you can work as a maid in my house." He meant well, but I said, "Well, that's great if I am alone." But my girlfriend and I, we were always together, and we said to each other while we were in prison and camp and everything, after the war, if we do survive and our husbands don't, we'll become stewardesses, because that way we don't have to commit suicide, but hopefully someday we will be killed by an accident. So, I mean, your brains didn't really work, but that's what our feeling was, and we were going to stay together. But it didn't end up that way, because she didn't, and she was convinced that her husband would survive. He's so strong, and he was one of the group that went with the evacuation of Auschwitz. He was really stronger than my husband. And because my husband was weak in the hospital, he did survive. And then I came to her relation in Rotterdam, non-Jewish people who helped them in the hiding, because they were in hiding too. And she said, we got news, bad news, we haven't heard from your family at all, to my friend, to Rosie. And she said, but I heard from another lady who was here in Rotterdam, that was Lydia, who was with us in the camp, a very religious lady, who was with us in Auschwitz. She survived. And her children were in hiding in Holland, so she did everything possible to survive, mentally, you know. So I said, oh, we're going to go and look her up. So I said, well, I had to go to The Hague. I said, well, I'll stay one more night. Because in a way, I was always also afraid to face up to the fact that nobody was there anymore. So I went with her to her Lydia's brother, who was Dr. Hausdorff, who was under hiding, I think, and he came and said that's where Lydia lived, because on the note that she wrote to Rosie's contact says there and there is where she lived. So Rosie and I went there after her friends gave us all kinds of clothing to wear that we look half decent. And we came and rang the bell and we said, we are camp friends from your, oh, come upstairs. She said, oh, Lydia is asleep. I don't want to wake her, but come right up. And she gave us something to eat. Religious Jewish people. It was on a Saturday. And we're sitting there, and about 15 minutes later, the door opens, and Lydia comes in the room, who we hadn't seen after, because she waited in the camp in Libau for the Red Cross, who came maybe 2 days after we left. So that's the mistake we made by leaving early. And Lydia comes in, and she said, oh, how great to say. And we hugged each other and said, how do you know that, well, Rosie said, my friends received your note, because we remembered our contacts in it. And she turns to me out of blue sky and she says, oh, Rosa, you're so lucky that Saul is alive. And that's the moment when I thought I fainted. So what? What she thought is I was already in The Hague and came back, and I wasn't there. And she said, don't you know? And so I don't know exactly what happened those few minutes. And then she showed me a card handwritten by Saul, that he was happy to hear from her, but I didn't show up yet, I didn't come yet. So I saw the address, and that was the old house from my in-laws. I said, oh, what am I going to do now? But I talked just like now, like I did at that moment. I have to go there. And they said, well, relax, we'll help you. So the first thing Mrs. Hausdorff thought was giving me food, because it was the most important. Then they brought me on Shabbat to the main road, even though they wouldn't allow me to drive on Shabbat, and hitchhiked an American car, a military car. There was nothing else to go. So I went in there, and the people were around me, and I'm sure that I talked just as much as I have been talking now to you. And I said, and my husband's waiting for me, and I can't believe it, and it's there and there. So he knew exactly where to stop, that gentleman. And I told all the ladies, the people in the back, my experiences. And it was not such a long ride, so I couldn't tell him everything. But then we came to Spuit W27, that's the address. And the military car stopped right across the street. And the last thought that went through my mind when I was crossing the street was, now be careful, don't get hit by a car, because that will be a waste at the last minute that you are coming back. And I look up, and I see Saul sitting in front of the window. He saw the car, and he ran downstairs, and my in-laws went downstairs, and I didn't have to ring the doorbell at all. And I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And my father-in-law, with a straight face, and it really meant that, he said, where's your luggage? I said, I always travel light. No idea what we went through. And after that, it was hard for me to realize. And I was very unhappy in Holland, afraid. Nightmares, I really did have nightmares there. I felt too close to Germany. So we started building up our lives again, because you cannot just, where do you go? And most people went to Australia. And then I got a letter from my boss where I used to work, the German company who was in Holland, who left Holland in 1940. 1939, 1940. They looked on the list of the Red Cross, and they saw that my name was on it, that I was a survivor. And they sent me food, and they sent me clothing, And whenever we can do something for you, we're happy to get papers ready for you if you want to come to the United States. And my husband could tell that I was very restless and all. I didn't do any. Then, after 3 months, in September, I realized I was expecting a baby, which helped a lot. And Max was born in 46. But my mind was, I was just worried all the time and afraid and everything. And we had a nice living again in the store, and I was as unhappy as can be. Then my husband's mother passed away in the year that Robbie was born, in 48. And then we couldn't have left yet because you had to wait for your quota number to come up. And one day, we got a letter from the American consul from Rotterdam that a number came up and make a decision. And everybody in Holland, all of it, terrible. That's a sin that you're leaving this country. You make a good living, you have 2 beautiful children. So I said, you're not going to stay. And I'm so grateful that he did it, because it's not easy to pick up and go. But that's the best thing we could have done. And everything is plus ever since we, even though it was hard in the beginning. But I got a great job at Bank of America. Started out with $170 a month, and saw, and we were so thankful. And really, people talk about, oh, United States. It's the best country. You can talk here. You can, and anybody from other countries, it's just jealousy when they talk you down that this is not good and that is not. It's not ideal, but nowhere is ideal. And I want to get in one more little things. I don't know if I'm towards the end, but I want to read Michelle's poem. Yeah. I don't know if you asked me questions. And I want to show this little ring, the bar mitzvah ring for my brother, and his initials are on there, Hartog van Gelder, and my sister and I bought that for him when he was 13 years old. In the middle of the war, in 39, my mother kept it, so we just didn't do it. This is a ring for my mother that she had forever, the earrings that I wear are my mother's. So I don't have any diamonds, as you see, and this little medallion my mother got in 1915 from the people she worked for. Remember when I said that's how she met her man? See, so.
This is a very pretty. This is your mother's.
Yes. See, and the date is. Oh, that's when Michelle was born. I got it. I'm really rattling off. See, March 1915, and M. de P. That's de Pinto. He's a very prominent person. He was in Holland.
Very
see, and now. Let me see. See, but you can see, but I know who's in there. My parents and.
Before we read the poem, this is a very pretty ring. Yeah. This is Hartog's bar mitzvah.
Hartog van Gelder, yeah.
And his bar mitzvah ring.
Yeah, and that's my mother's. This was my mother's. And this is a nice ring too. With God's help, our love will last forever, and it did.
What we'll do before we read the poem, I want to end on the poem.
Yeah.
Is let's look at some of the pictures you brought.
Yeah.
Let's start with this picture here. Oh, could you describe this one for me?
That was in 1967, and Otto Frank was in Amsterdam. There was a promotion about a book or something, because he's very active with the Achterhuis van Anne Frank, how do you call it? The Anne Frank House? I don't know how to.
Memorial House.
Yeah, this is Otto Frank, and that's me, and that's my husband. It's bleaching a little bit, huh? We met him there. And his mother was still alive. She survived the war in Switzerland, and she knit a little outfit for Max when we came back. And I had to tell him about all the things that I knew about Anne and the family. But I felt so bad to tell him that they had the same chances I did to survive. But it's just unlucky. It was not meant to be. And then, but I always told him, too, that maybe she makes a bigger impact on the world, the fact that she did die instead of going on. But it's very... And then after the war, he remarried to a lady who lost her husband in the war. And her daughter survived, also in camp. And they wrote a book, too. And I keep in touch with her, too. I just got a letter from her. She's over 80 already. Yeah. And this
This picture here?
This is just Sal and I in Pasadena. We lived there from 1956 to 79. And we lived close to a shul because the kids go to school because we were both working. And we had a real good time there, a good life.
Sal looks very much the same today as he did then. He hasn't changed very much.
No, he didn't. Even though he has a lot of problems with arthritis and he weighed 90 pounds and his spine never grew back. So, and this is where we live in Costa del Sol. That might look familiar to you because that's Sal and it's I. Somebody took that a couple of years ago. And this is, oops, excuse me.
This picture was taken a few years ago, that one?
Yeah, somebody was visiting us and he just wanted to take a picture.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Max and Rob were born in 46 and
48, yes.
And Max has two daughters?
Yeah, a son, Sue's son, Ben, who was a little baby when he met, and two girls. And Robbie has two boys and a girl. She just had it. You want me to point out who's who?
Yes, who's who in this picture? This is
now, this is the Bas Mitzvah picture from Michelle and Marcy. We had company from Holland. There was Sal's brother and his wife, Yanni. Now, this is Sal and I, and this is Sue, who is married to Max, and this is Ben, that's the son, Sue's son. He was a little baby when Max got to know Sue. And this is Robert and Kathy DeLiema, and this is Julie, Jonathan, and David. And this gives us such a good feeling because, like yesterday, I told you we went to a soccer game and Robbie is the coach and Max is the assistant coach, and the two girls are playing in the team. So we have a lot to be thankful for, and our second part of our life really makes up for all the sadness that we have had. It is a hard price to pay, but we appreciate everything so much more than anybody.
It's a beautiful picture. It's a fine family.
Yes, they're really active in temple and everything. We couldn't ask for better kids. And we did tell them about the war, but it came slowly. We didn't say, now sit down, I'm going to tell you. It went real easy, and they think it had a good effect on them. I'm slipping, huh?
Perhaps before we read the poem,
sure.
I thought maybe on the bottom of your manuscript, you gave the dates when various members of your family.
Yes.
You looked the records up.
Yes. During my visit, you want me to? To Yad Vashem in Jerusalem in September '76, I learned the following sad facts. Dates documented by the Dutch government when my family was murdered by the Germans. I want to bring out, I say Germans, not Nazis, because all the Germans knew what was going on, and they helped. My father, February 26, 43 in Auschwitz. My mother, February 26, 43 in Auschwitz. My sister, Beb, February 1st, 43 in Auschwitz. My sister, Rosetta, February 1st, 43 in Auschwitz. And my brother, Hartog, June 30, 1944, somewhere in Middle Europe. Somebody told me, who was with him in the camp there, that they were just shot to death, and the German came and he just picked up, because he worked there. He was like in the labor camp after Auschwitz. Yeah, there's so much to tell. Do you want me to read the poem now?
Yes.
Now my oldest granddaughter, Michelle DeLiema, and then she was in grade 5 at Temple Eilat, that's now Congregation Eilat, in Mission Viejo, and she won the first prize with this poem, A Child of the Holocaust, by Michelle DeLiema. A teenage girl walking in the field saw some strangers coming, dark and scary men with a crooked cross on their head. Why were they coming? Why were they there? They knew she was Jewish and started to stare. Come here, little girl. Run if you dare. We will catch you. We will grab your long hair. You are a Jew. That's bad. You're not as good as me. We will chain you. We will beat you. We will never set you free. You have taken the others. Now it's my turn to go, to join with my family. Why do you hate us so? Do we scare you? Do we frighten you? Are you so insecure that you hate and you kill because you're not sure? You are weak. You are sad. You look up to one face. Look at yourself. Are you in the human race? They took her away to a hard labor camp, where they worked her and beat her in the cold and the damp. She was weak and got sick, but her heart still was strong. The pain of those memories stays with her all day long. She lost her whole family and cries some of the time, but she's willing to tell us of her life in those times. I've heard her story told. So many times I cry. I think I know what happened, but I'll never understand why. I have some things to tell my children to live by in their life, and I keep telling them that, and I have that at the end of, and if I may read this, it says, practice your willpower. It takes more courage to say no than to go along with the crowd. Things could always be worse. When the chips are down, keep your chin up. Be thankful every day that you're healthy and free. Above all, have love and gezelligheid, that's coziness, in your home. Love, Mother. They know that by heart, but I repeated it again. And then I want to tell you another thing that my husband experienced, that he saw Germans, soldiers, Gestapo, go to a little church in Auschwitz. There was a little chapel, and they would go and pray there and turn right around and kill as many people as possible. So how can we forgive? And how can the Germans say they didn't know about it? Because there were so many, they knew, all of them knew it, but they don't want to admit it that they knew it, because they could smell everything from the towers where they burned the people. And a couple of years ago, I went to Holland, and I happened to sit next to a German man who was married to a Dutch girl, and we ordered kosher. So he comes around and says, "Who ordered kosher?" I said, "We did." And they had a darling little boy, blonde boy. And he said, he looks at me. I said, "Yes, I want you to know I'm German. I'm Jewish. I'm Jewish, and I can understand everything you say in German. But oh." I want you to know that I'm Jewish, and I can understand German, so whatever you say, I can. He was talking a little bit of Dutch to his wife, too. And then he said, "Well, I don't know anything about what happened during the war." And I said, "Well, I got news for you. If I were your parents, I wouldn't tell you anything what happened about the war either, because it is so terrible and unbelievable that they're so ashamed of it, and that's why they didn't want to admit it." So now the younger people pretend they don't know, and that's a big danger, because all the parents knew, but they never explained to the children why and what happened, and they blame it all to a few SS and Gestapo. They could never have accomplished this. All the Germans cooperated, and the more Jews were killed, the better it was for them.
Well, this concludes our interview. Is there anything else you would like to add at this time to complete your testimony?
Well, not for me personally, but there are a few books that really are important to be read, and that is One by One by One by Judith Miller. Maybe you have read it. And another book which explains the reaction from a Jewish person and an SS guy, and that is named Holocaust by Green is his last name, Gilbert Green. I might be wrong with the first name. Very informative, by Bentham, published by Bentham Books. And that's very important to read. I also just recently read a book, and the name of it is Gods of Your Choice by Richard Parrish. excellent book. And that's all. I hope that I gave a lot of good information, and
Very good.
appreciate it.
Before we actually break, we would like to get another shot of
Oh,
your arm.
okay.
Maybe we can get a close view of it.
Oh, I put it here. Is it upside down? Does it matter?
Let me see. Oh, that's fine. That's good.
Take the wrinkles out.
This has been very helpful.
Yeah.
Once again, Rose, thank you very much.
Oh,
You're wonderful.
you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. I think it's important to keep people informed.